Hi, everybody. I'll stop talking if Kent Schellenberger jumps on here and starts to teach, but I was just going to say hello to everyone. It's nice to see you all. Okay, so in chat, you might have seen Dr. Schellenberger has sent out a little note to everyone saying that they're getting set up right now. Do any of you have any questions for me while we're waiting around, either about this class in particular or the program in general after the orientation weekend? Felt like everything was laid out pretty well for you?
Yeah, I don't have any initial questions at this moment, so I'm good.
Okay, good. And I'm sorry we didn't get to meet before. You go by Nate, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I look forward to hearing about your project.
Okay, cool deal.
And no, I don't have any questions.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I was trying to unmute while you were talking. I'm like, dang it, I don't want him to think we're just ignoring him.
No, I get sometimes I unmute and then I realize I've only unmuted on Zoom, but my computer is still muted, and yeah, it's all sorts of stuff. So did anyone feel like you gained any clarity over the orientation weekend about your project?
Like our dissertation?
Yeah.
Somewhat. I'm still trying to narrow some things down. So.
Okay, good. Well, as long as you didn't walk away from it feeling like you didn't have a project at all. That's good.
Oh no.
Good.
All right, I'm eating fruit snack. Apologize if you can hear it.
Since I have dogs walking around, I'm going to mute myself unless somebody asks me a question, then I'll unmute. This is actually the first class I've sat in on. Well, I've taught a class for the program, but this is the first class I've sat in on with students. So this will be a lot of fun. Just saying. I'll try to be quiet though. I'll try not to be the student who jumps in.
I guess they can hear you. I don't know.
Can y'all hear us now?
You know, I'm wondering if the other students are having trouble finding
we can hear you.
The link, because like when I first looked at the orientation, like unless I start playing around with the grades, then I was able to see the separate course, and then that's how I was able to find it. I'm wondering if other people are having trouble with that.
I don't know. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh my gosh. Bingo. But you can't see us.
No, can't see you.
That might be a plus. Okay. So there's that.
Cannot detect It's your camera.
Whenever they turned on.
Hang on, I'm gonna put us on, y'all are doing great. I love this discussion. But I'm gonna put us on mute since we know you can hear us. And then we're working on the video. But this is really going better than it sounds.
Okay, so Cynthia, you said you received the email with the link today. Okay, thanks. Hopefully everyone checked their emails. Maybe people didn't check their emails. Ah, okay. Yeah, I'll let Dr. Case know that maybe we need to send out some kind of notice letting people to check their emails, make sure they didn't go to their junk mail on accident or something. If you see a dog jump up in my lap, we have a Chinese crested, and if you don't know what that is, they're the dogs that always win the world's ugliest dog award, but they're the sweetest things in the world. I'm trying to make sure she doesn't just jump up in my lap while we're doing this.
Okay.
On the upside, or on a plus side, you guys can all look back on this and tell people that you got your start as Dr. So-and-so during a terrible ice storm where we had to meet over this old fangled contraption called Zoom, which I'm sure, your kids or grandkids aren't even going to hear about. It'll be like MySpace.
Yeah. Yeah. This is interesting for a first class day. I'm glad we had orientation so we can get a feel for it.
Oh, yeah. I could just hear your kids saying, well, why didn't you meet over holograms? That's weird.
Yeah.
Is everyone prepared for the oncoming blizzard this weekend? Yeah.
No, I need to go grocery shop.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No kidding. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think the last projection I heard was 10 to 15 inches of snow here in the metro area.
Oh my gosh.
Wild. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to grocery shop tomorrow though.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Hello, greetings 14059. Yeah, you're on mute. I am trying to remember from memory. I know I got your name.
There it goes.
Okay.
Hello,
Oh.
everybody.
Yes. Okay. Hey. I'm so
Hi,
terrible.
how's it going?
Hi.
I heard your voice. Yeah.
Oh, God, stressed out today. How about everybody else?
Yeah.
Yep. Join the crowd.
Did the weather
Oh,
impact
gosh.
your work?
No, not really. It's not too bad. Just slow and steady. That's all you got to do. Slow, steady, 2 car lengths behind, and don't rush. It's always my motto during this time. I'm more stressed out about this class than I am the roads.
Well, Dr. Schellenberger is really good hands to start out in. Yeah,
Good,
both
good.
you and Dr. Case.
It's not him I'm worried about. I got to wrap my mind around learning again. So
Yeah.
excited to be here though.
Good. That's great.
I'm not sure why the number pops up instead of my name. I have to figure that out later.
I think you can click on it and rename your box. I have to do mine every time because I come up as SP, so I have to put my name in there.
Okay.
It's like a right click function or something.
Okay. Well, I'm going to log off and try and log back on and rename it.
Okay.
Yeah, because there it goes. I think it'll let me do it from there. All right. Yay. See, old dogs can learn new tricks. There we go. Bam.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. It looks like they're almost set up in the room. So did anyone else look at the weather outside and like my wife and I go, we'll just eat potatoes tonight. It's what we have in the house.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
How about crackers and water? It sounds
Yeah.
pretty good to me right about now.
Oh yeah, no kidding, Cynthia. I just saw your text. Yeah, God willing, that doesn't happen to anyone. That's terrible. I always drive through the city on my way to work because I live on the south side, and just seeing the homeless in the city made me really concerned for them. I'm hoping that they come out of this okay. Sorry, I had to take care of dogs, but yeah, Jonathan, I just saw your chat question. Really good question. So Jonathan asks, is it too early to ask for approval for a dissertation committee member? I don't think so. I think it's okay to go ahead and run those by us and get that started. So yeah, if you've got someone, absolutely.
Do I need to email that to you, I guess?
Yes, yeah. And then I'll just I'll check with since this will be new to me, I'll check with Dr. Case about the process. But no, yeah, never too early. Yeah. Good
Perfect.
question. Yeah.
Thank
I like your background. It makes me feel like I'm not actually in a blizzard right now, or an oncoming blizzard.
Thank you. It's what I use for my kids. So
Oh, nice.
So Dr. Penley, that being said, this is Stephanie. We have to select a dissertation chair and a committee member, or I'm still a little unclear on that.
Yes, so you'll select a chair. We can help you with that, but you'll select a chair and you'll select your committee members. Aside from, I'll automatically be on your committee, obviously. But yeah, no, we'll help you put your committee together. But if you don't have an idea for a chair, definitely that'd be something to ask me about, and then we can see if we can find a faculty member maybe on an SNU here who can serve on your committee, who's got some experience in your project area.
Okay, how many committee members do I, is it 3 for a total of 4 and our chair? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm trying to picture it from memory. Yeah, I was just working on the dissertation template today. 4 of them.
Okay, that and plus the chair, or does that include the chair?
Let me look real fast at that little dissertation template, and I'll tell you.
I apologize.
No, that's great. Those are things I need to know. Oops. Yes. Let's see. The galloping noise was my giant poodle. Let's see. Well, I was just working on that today. Well, funny enough, even though I was working on that today, I can't find my copy of it. But yeah, so from my memory of the dissertation template is that it's 4 total. It's a chair and then 3 members. But we can double check with Dr. Case on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Greetings to everyone who's appeared. We are getting set up in the room. It looks like they might be coming along.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You know, technology is kind of amazing.
Yeah, actually, it really is. Yeah.
Yeah, this is fascinating.
I joked earlier, though, that our grandkids generation is going to ask, why didn't we just meet over hologram? I mean,
Yeah,
this is outdated here pretty soon.
absolutely. Well, we do a lot of this at work now. Since COVID, we use what do we use? Teams. And so you do a lot of this here, but it's amazing how connected you can be, and how, and actually you save a lot of time because you're not stopping and going to meetings and so forth as much as you did. So actually pretty effective.
Hi, everybody. We've got our technology running the way we want it to run here in Harris 130. Dr. Wintroth graced us with that 6. He doesn't know what he did, but it worked. So we're
Good to be lucky.
Good to be lucky. Dr. Penley, I've heard you answering questions and making everybody feel comfortable. Big thanks. Thank you very, very much. But y'all don't need to quit talking. I love it.
Not a printer in here, is there? And a piece of paper.
Shelby, I hope you aren't driving.
I'll pay you back.
Hi, Kaylin. You know, I just am so sad that that we have to meet on Zoom our first night. So that's the cloud, but the silver lining to that cloud is that we can meet on Zoom, right? And I would not have been comfortable asking you all to get out on the streets, especially your neighborhood streets, to come to class. So thankfully we can do this. But next week, Lord willing, and the temperature will rise, then we should be able to meet here on campus as planned.
We're supposed to get 2 feet of snow, aren't we?
Yeah, we're supposed to get 2 feet of snow. It's going to be really exciting. I get to wear my snowshoes.
It's a good day. You get to wear your snowshoes.
I bought new snow inner tubes. So you guys come to my house. I've got a hill.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice. That sounds fun. Well, next week we might be Zoom too. Who knows? Because yeah, I heard that, what is it, Monday, we're supposed to get somewhere between 10 and 14 inches of snow.
Yeah.
But if we can get started like this, then once we can meet the way we're supposed to meet face to face, it'll be great. So if this is great, that'll be even better, right?
Absolutely.
Well, any questions about homework or what's on our, I'll share our screen here for just a minute. Oh, host disabled attendee, oops. I need to talk to Shari about that. I need to be able to share my screen. So on our class, a few of you still need to submit your introduce yourself. Now it says that is due February 9th, which was yesterday, but you can still turn it in. You know, turn it in tonight or tomorrow sometime. We're all getting used to this, and turning that in a little bit late is not a big deal. But then we have some things that we are going to do tonight in class. Let me see if I link the right PowerPoint. Any other questions while I'm doing this? Oh, good. I even have the right PowerPoint linked for us. So some of you will be glad to know that, you know, because we're going to talk about this tonight, and I really want you to listen and soak it in. But the thing is that I also want to make the PowerPoint slides available to you. So, so those are there on the campus site. That's exactly what it is. Now, some of y'all, hopefully you can toggle back and forth between our Zoom page. The camera will still be on you and everything, but you can toggle back and forth between the Zoom page and the Canvas site if you want. Once I share my screen with you, you should be able to should be able to see the PowerPoint just fine. But the thing I was going to say that you might be glad to know is that Servant Leadership PowerPoint is linked there on our screen, and the title of it is Servant Leadership PowerPoint. And it's kind of, let's see, where is it in week 1? It's a link to a Google slide. It's the last thing right above homework for week 2. And, nope, sorry, it's not the last. Yeah, it is. Sorry, it is the last thing right above week 2. And there is something in week 2 that I'm going to move to homework. I mean, excuse me, week 1 that I'm going to move to homework for week 2 since we're meeting via Zoom. So it's a video for you to watch, a YouTube video. Okay, we've got a few more minutes, so you guys just can visit a little bit. You received an email, I believe, from Dr. Schellenberger today telling you who your partner was to interview. Okay, so y'all may use this time in the chat, or you might email each other to exchange phone numbers or do whatever, because after we're done with the servant leadership lecture and PowerPoint, then you will need to contact each other. And Tanya, I will give you $20 for those ears on those headphones. That is a hoot. I'm just digging it. What is that little thing in the middle? Is that a unicorn? Is that a unicorn thing in the middle? Oh, it lights up.
Wow.
That's good stuff right there.
Where did you get those? Gotta be Amazon.
They're my 6-year-old daughter's headphones.
My grandkids love them.
When I say, go grab me a pair of headphones so that I can do my class, and this is what I get.
Nice.
It's awesome.
Let's just see about that. I'm gonna check my Amazon. Fancy headphones.
Okay, we're going to start up here in a minute. If you all want to grab a cup of coffee or something, now's a good time to do it right before we start up.
I see them, Tanya. $20, Amazon Prime. I'm gonna have to get those for my granddaughters. Fancy headphones for girls. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, they think that'd be pretty neat. I may just have to get those. $20.62. I'll get them Friday.
Okay. Dawn, do you want to do the devotional?
Whenever I'm ready. Whenever you're ready. Sounds like you've done pretty good because
you want to stand over here? Or you want me to switch the? Yeah, I'm gonna.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, I'll just set it here. I'll stay here.
I feel like I'm on a
radio show or something.
Can y'all hear me?
Whoa. Yes.
Get ready to announce a horse race.
Oops, we're gonna have to go all the way around. See, that's what y'all look like. That's what we're looking at.
Kind of like around the world.
Yep. I took a long way around accidentally.
See, I didn't even know there was such a contraption as that remote control. I just stood on a chair and just spun that baby around.
Dr. Penley, is that your puppy?
Yeah, it's hard to keep her off me. That's why I keep going to no video. Sorry.
Listen, I have a new little one at my house too. Sorry, I'm gonna go back this short way. And today she was doing great while I was in the Zoom meeting, but the price of that greatness was my husband's slipper. So she tore that up, but like I said, it was worth it. And it's his slipper, not mine.
What's her name, Dr. Pendley?
She's Nefertiti, but we call her Neffy.
I love that. Hi, Nefertiti. She's like, yeah, no.
All right. Well, everyone, without further ado.
So do you have an Anox and a moon too?
Say again.
Oh, man.
Without further ado, let's go ahead and officially launch night number 1 of DL3, and this is servant leadership. And this class will be taught officially by myself and Dr. Don Whitroth and Dr. Kent Schellenberger. So I welcome all of you, and tonight Dr. Whitroth is giving the devotion.
So we had the super devotional planned for you tonight, but because it's bad weather, we didn't feel like our guest should be out on the streets. So we've got him moved to next week, and hopefully, like we were saying, the Nanook from the north won't blow through here and snow us in again. So hopefully we'll get him in here next week. So you're having to deal with me. So this devotional, all of these, at least in this book, are prayers. And so if it sounds like a prayer, that's why it does. And so what I want you to do is I want you to think about this devotional and think about it through the lens of a leader, either a leader in a school setting or business or ministerial, whatever. And I want you to respond after I finish with this thing about just your thoughts. I'm very comfortable with silence, so I can outweight you if you're just going to sit there and stare at your screen. So if you need to make some notes, go for that too. That's what I usually have to do. So here we go. Almighty God, before me is here we go, brand new day, the end of a brand new day. How about that? Filled with opportunities to live out my calling as a servant. I trust you to guide me so that all I do and say will be to your glory. Father, help me to be sensitive to what is happening to people around me. I know there are unmet needs beneath the surface of the most successful and the most self-assured. I know that today I will meet some who are enduring hidden physical or emotional pain, others who are fearful of an uncertain future, and still others who carry burdens of worry for families or friends. May I take no one for granted, but instead be a ready communicator of your love and encouragement. Make me aware of these concerns of others, available to express your care and articulate with your hope. I pray this through Christ, who gave us the key of self-sacrifice to set us free from the dungeon of selfishness. Wow. Amen. So how does that hit you? As a leader, I am sure you are all leaders in one form or another. You have influence, in other words, either at work or in your family. So how does that hit you as a leader?
It's a job. It's a calling, being a leader. I was once told when I started my my journey as a therapist by a supervisor of mine. She told me that whenever you go into a room of clients, you have to be like an empty vase. You can't have a lot of your stuff in. You have to allow them to pour into you. And to me, that's the type of servant for the last 10 years that I've been working with children in the foster care community. You just
Okay.
kind of, yes. You know, you just kind of have to sometimes sit with them, even though you don't see things effectively happening for them, but you never realize how important it is to sit with somebody when it's hard.
Okay, absolutely. Anyone else?
I think the point that it said with unmet needs beneath successful people and self-assured people, that's working with kids. Even our kids that come off as, you know, the A+ student, the valedictorian of their class, there's still something there that needs to be addressed, that needs to be supported. And a good leader, administrator, they're going to know those kids by name. They're going to know the kids that aren't the valedictorian. All of those needs are going to be met in some way or another, or at least try to.
Isn't it funny that we view a lot of people as having it all? They've got the great looks, they've got the great mind, they're a great athlete, they've got a wonderful bank account, whatever. But in my experience, everyone, it hurts, and everyone is, even the most glamorous, hurt in ways that most don't see. So absolutely everyone needs to be ministered to, and at least as a leader, you need to be sensitive to those people and be able to pick up on things. Nonverbal cues from people, you know how that goes, ladies. Especially young women can give you a direction to go with never saying a word, but just the eyes and just the slant of that mouth, they can, there's no verbal things said, but the message is very clear. So body language is very important too, and you need to read your followers. I'm going to say too, and I probably won't say this again, but my experience on these Zoom calls, it's not called, Zoom meeting, is people tend to be a little reluctant to participate in discussions because there's that slight delay, and people kind of hesitate because they don't want to walk on other people. And so try to fight that a little bit, because especially if we have to do this again next week and even this week, you need to participate if you're really gonna get much out of this class. And I'm just gonna say this is a really great class. I can't wait to be in it with you. Any other comments about the devotional? Anybody got something burning?
What stood out to me was really empathy, acknowledging every circumstance, basically all those hidden things. Everybody always shows up to work, and usually we're working with kids, and you put aside whatever your personal struggles are. But I think building a trust with your faculty and staff of addressing the hidden things that are going on in everybody's life creates trust, and they know that you're empathetic.
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons why this first night we were planning on spending so much time getting to know each other, because relationships are so important for leaders to learn how to develop. And we'll talk more about that probably as time goes along, but I absolutely agree with you. Anything else?
For me, it was the line for dungeon of selfishness, because I think a good leader has to understand it's not about them. It's about those that we serve. I always tell the people that I hire, if you understand this mission is not about you, you'll make it. If not, you're always focused inward and it's always me, me, me. You can't serve that way. So that was a very poignant line for me.
When I would talk with my faculty, I would explain to them that my job wasn't as important as theirs. My title seems to impress some people, but for our organization to work at its maximum speed or accomplish the maximum things, they can't do my job and I can't do theirs. And if we're both trying to do each other's jobs, we get lost in a big tug of war. And so it is important to understand it's not about me. It's about the function of the group. And when you can get your followers, and again, I don't mean that followers as a derogatory term, but when you can get your followers to understand that concept, you can do great things.
I think for me, because I'm in industry, so I work a manufacturing plant, and I think this last year has been so difficult with COVID and with all of the experiences that people have had with family, with friends, with just uncertainty, with so much. And then, you know, with my company, what work we're getting is very important to us, but we can't sacrifice our people in order to achieve that work. We have to work with them. And I think because we've respected them so much, appreciate them so much, that servant leadership that we've shown to them it's been paid back to us. So I mean, these times more than ever, I think it's so important that you are thinking about the individual. You think about us, because companies won't survive, you know, beyond this if we can't look at the individual versus what's important to the bottom line, if that makes sense. And we've had a very positive experience based on that in industry. So I'm very excited, you know, anyway.
Yeah, people, I know in education, if you don't recognize that your most valuable resource are your teachers, you're going to miss the mark.
I want to piggyback on Juanita's comment. And especially the line that said the sacrifice of Christ to help us from our selfishness. And right here, you can just cut to the chase, because you're looking to a higher power and you're asking God to help you and to do things that you yourself never thought you could do, and to ask him to open up your understanding and open up things you didn't consider or think about. And suddenly God can drop something into your mind that you need for the moment. So, I mean, for me, just cut to the chase, just get right to God and ask him to help you. Everything else is fine. It's true. The body language, the leadership by example, all those wonderful things. But I think we need to guard our hearts and get to the core.
It's kind of scary. We just talked about this in Sunday school this last week. It's pretty scary to think that we are God's voice to people here on earth. We are his hands and we do his bidding, and that's a pretty big responsibility. And as a leader, you have the ability to raise people up or crush them. And so it's a pretty awesome power. You've got to use it with care. Okay, did we handle that, Dr. Case?
That's great.
Oh my gosh.
Did you already pray?
No, that was my prayer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Prayer is covered. We are all good.
Okay. You want me to get on the clicker for you?
You know, well, I'm gonna have to be able to share my screen.
I can do that.
So, well, we can't. I've been talking with Dr. Penley. So Dr. Penley's the host of this meeting, so he's gonna pull up this PowerPoint and
I wondered why we didn't have breakout rooms down there across the bottom. I thought, nah, this is an odd difference.
That's why.
Okay.
So let me get the, I will get the, let's see what's the short way around. Yeah, I'm gonna get the camera turned back this way towards me. And there he goes. And so we are going to talk about servant leadership. And since I very first said this, I think just a handful of you are on for questions a little before 6:30. And so, oops, there I am. And the thing is that this is our very first night of class, and so we have done so much preparation. We're so excited to be here, and thank heavens we have Zoom and can do this, right? And we don't have to totally cancel class for a week or two, because we actually don't know what next week involves yet, do we? It's going to be kind of sketchy next week with what, up to 14 inches. Let me grab my notes. Okay, so if you guys want to pull up the PowerPoint on your Canvas tab, that will be fine. I don't think that I'm going to be able to show it to you on my screen. And you'll also like knowing that you have access to this. What I'd like to do as we go along and talk about these things, and servant leadership and extensions that we discussed on Friday night when I spoke, I'd like to offer to you the opportunity to ask a question. Now, I know that you're all on mute right now, so you know, if you have a question, you can just come off of mute and just interrupt me. That's okay. I won't be offended. You aren't doing anything rude. Or you can put something in the chat. Now, while I'm speaking, I may not hear it as quickly as I would like to, so it's okay to unmute your microphone and to speak. But I'm starting with the first slide that says servant leadership, the oxymoron and a paradox.
I'll kind of read the comments, and if I see something pop up, I got to move up here where my eyes can see.
Dr. Wintroth's going to monitor the chats for me.
It won't come up on here, Dr. Case?
It'll come up right over here.
No, I mean the servant leadership
It won't,
PowerPoint.
because we're in Zoom, it won't let me share my screen.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I could share it, but I'll need the host code. I've got a prompt for entering a 6 to 10 digit host key code.
And I do not know where that is. I'd have to get into your Zoom account. Do all of you see those of you that want to be able to see, can you see the PowerPoint? If you go over to, okay, good. So I won't worry. And sometimes it's kind of nice to just listen. I know it's nice for me to be able to see you all. And the book that the primary text, I didn't have y'all buy this book, but it's this servant leadership book, or no, excuse me, this leadership book by Northouse. So this is the quintessential book these days on all types of leadership. And there are lengthy chapters for a variety of types. And so my focus is from the chapter on servant leadership. So between this source as a good summary and sources from Greenleaf himself, from Spears, a guy named Dierendorf, and those types of people, I've just put this together. So have any of you, since we met on Friday night, I think I told you, I said, be thinking about if you observed any servant leadership situations or institutions or organizations. Anybody? Well, I want you to start looking, and some of you may not have any exposure to a servant leadership organization. That's understandable. And then some of you may feel like that you have existed within one. So, so the thing about servant leadership, as I have studied it, that I will say is that the words are in the right order. In Greenleaf, the premise of his entire conceptualization of servant leadership felt like that a person was a servant first. They had a desire to serve others, to serve them in a variety of ways, caring for them, supporting them, encouraging them, but a desire to serve others, that was first. And then once that happened, there was a decision to also be a leader. So, you know, it has to come the way we speak English. We put the adjective before the noun, so it has to be said servant leadership. But in reality, Greenleaf would also say he felt like you had to be a servant first and then make a decision to be a leader. It came, as I told you Friday night, as an inspiration from this book called The Journey to the East. And just, it arrived on my front porch yesterday. I bought a copy of that book. I haven't read it yet, but I am really curious to read that book, and I find it very interesting that Greenleaf was inspired by this story, this group of travelers, and that the person who was traveling with him as a servant was actually the leader. And so the synopsis of the book that I read indicates that that servant is actually the one that made the group successful. The servant wasn't there and wasn't leading as a servant, they weren't successful. So he had a 40-year career. And it looks to me, I haven't read a biography on him, but if there is one, I'd love to read it. That looks to me like that was maybe his entire career with a large organization. He was with AT&T. And then by the time he retired from AT&T, he was set up for another 25 years as a consultant. And he had an organization, the Greenleaf Servant Leadership Center. And it also had another name to start out with. But he consulted with institutions that you would all recognize: MIT, the Ford Foundation, some big name companies. And Larry Spear also became very involved with him and was a big part of continuing Greenleaf's work. So under this model of servant leadership, the idea is that the people that we serve as servant leaders, they become healthier people. They become wiser, freer, more autonomous, and then they can also become servants themselves. So you see that the line between the servant leader and the followers might start to get blurred. Now, some people, some leaders are not comfortable with that line. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Some leaders want that line to be maybe even a wall. They want it to be very distinct and very clear. Now, I'm not saying that those leaders are bad leaders, but they would not be servant leaders, because servant leaders are just innately able to relate to other people. They, and all those characteristics that we listed that we're going to study some more next week, they listen to each other, they help heal each other. And so a servant leader is definitely in relationship and connected to followers.
I'm wondering,
Go ahead.
Dr. Case, I'm wondering, I remember from the slides that you showed transformational leadership and service leadership being in that same box. And so my wondering is, service leaders, transformational leaders, I would think that those leadership styles actually produce more sustainable change because they're built on this healing and this empathy and this listening, whereas maybe the other leadership styles may cause slight change in the moment, but it's not sustainable. Is there any evidence of that?
Well, that's a good question. So you need to write that question down, okay? Because we're going to have a panel on March 3rd. So will you do me a favor? That was Lisa, right?
Yes.
Okay. So write that question down for me, Lisa, and let's have that the night of the panel. But my reaction to you now is that, yes, servant leadership, transformational leadership styles, those are more sustainable. Those also take more time to establish as far as building the success and building the model where people trust each other and people communicate with each other. It does take more time. And then, you know, it also depends on, I'll get into this a little bit there too, the receptivity of the followers to that servant leadership model or that transformational leadership model. Now, I personally think that servant leadership is like a subcategory of transformational leadership, but that really doesn't make a big difference in anybody's world. Okay. Now, did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And that question, one reason I asked you to write that down, and that's something for y'all to consider, because that may be a good research question depending on the study that you choose to research. You know, is servant leadership more sustainable than an authoritative leadership style? That would be great, or even a democratic leadership, because they're closer in nature. So that would be an interesting question to answer. Thank you. Now you're going to see, as you're following along on your computer, several slides that are about the characteristics, and there's lots of details there. Listening, healing, persuasion, etc. And I have these slides printed off right now, and so I'm just turning those pages because I will use this same presentation when we talk more in depth about characteristics next week, okay? But if y'all want to read over those and kind of have that in your backpack as we talk next week, that would be just fine. So the first slide then that we will pick up on will be whatever number it is. I didn't number my slides. Note to self, always number your slides. Is the one that says servant leadership theory. Okay, now you all are embarking on a journey in which theory and the study of theory is going to become very important. My daughter kind of cracks me up. She always uses the word theoretically. And so I correct her on that. And I say, well, no, really, honey, you're saying practically, or you're saying in reality. But theory is kind of like a framework, kind of like a pattern that you can plan on this theory working. You can prove a theory, you can disprove a theory. But very early on in the servant leadership design by Greenleaf, you know, he just took off on his own with this idea. Servant leadership was a lot more loosely defined, and it was definitely emerging from his heart and from his passion for this. It was really an approach to leadership. And the term that researchers use as they describe this advent of servant leadership is that it was more prescriptive. So when Robert Greenleaf went out and did work and did consulting and used this servant leadership idea, it was really prescriptive. In other words, he prescribed to them and to these companies, this is what you should do. And this is how you should do it. Okay, so a theory is not prescriptive in nature. A theory is more descriptive of a process and of a structure. So originally it was called an ideal, it was more prescriptive, and he worked with companies. Some of these you may know what they are, and I don't. I just listed down the ones that I saw. The Toro Company, Herman Miller, Synovus Financial Corps, Service Master, I know about. Men's Warehouse, I know about. Southwest Airlines, that didn't surprise me one bit, that they were built on a servant leadership model. And then TDI Industries, or TD Industries, whichever it is. Okay, the next slide. So at first it was more of a principle, more prescriptive, but within about 20 years, in the 90s, more researchers started studying it. And since 2002, so there for 10 years, it started to enjoy more research done on the idea of servant leadership. And in 2002, researchers began to build a theory around the concept of servant leadership. So, and they found different things. So in the world of researchers, and you have like say 10 different researchers, they may come up with 10 different frameworks, but it's kind of the same idea. So for example, Russell and Stone, they did some landmark research on servant leadership, and they decided that servant leadership had 20 attributes, 9 characteristics, and 11 company characteristics that look like behaviors. Now, in my world, I would just call those attributes, characteristics, and behaviors. But for whatever reason, they called them company characteristics. So sometimes you'll find that with researchers, that they love to sound a little bit fancy. Patterson, another researcher a year later, came up with 7 constructs that characterize the virtues and shape behaviors. So while they were dealing with the same concept of servant leadership, they each came up with different ways to account for it and to organize it. Now, on your next slide, I'm going to talk about that, but go ahead and flip to the slide that has a chart on it. It's figure 10.1, the model of servant leadership. I'll give you a second to get there. Okay, so this is the model of servant leadership that Northhouse focuses on, and honestly, I really like it. It kind of makes sense, and that's I'm sure why he chose it, is because it seemed like it synthesized a word that y'all are going to be learning, that it synthesized a lot of the information from a lot of the researchers. So this chart is adapted. Tell me when to start.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, so this, Dr. Woodroff, you know what? Let me put your phone number on here. Can they not hear me?
Well, one of the comments was you are soft spoken.
I am, and I know
There,
that about
that's going to be
myself.
good. That's going to
Is
be
that gonna
good.
be good?
Yeah.
Is that a little better, everybody?
Thumbs up.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, I need nods of heads or thumbs up or something. Thank you. And you know, we all wish the Lord would have blessed us.
Oh, there, I'm on the camera.
Oh, you can be on the camera.
No, I don't
It's
wanna be.
okay. Would you like me to give them your cell number and they can text you if they have a question during this?
Maybe.
That might be good.
Good. They can text me at my number.
Okay, okay. Dr. Schlimberger, what's yours?
405
405.
834
Okay, hang on, let me get in there. 405.
834.
It's not letting me in. Hang on. Let's see, numbers lock. 405 834. Okay.
6122.
Okay, that might be good since we're kind of doing a workaround here that if the chat isn't working for you, you can text Dr. Schellenberger and then he can pause us. Okay, so you are looking at that table. And this table provides a summary of multiple studies and will set up for us kind of an outline of how we interpret all that we're going to talk about. It shows not complete agreement, but some good groundwork. All right, the antecedent conditions. So here's what you have in this model of leadership. You have like, you're going in, imagine that you're going into an organization, an institution, a business, something like that. And the antecedent conditions would be what exists when you arrive. So I do think that is named really well. Antecedent conditions. So the first thing in these conditions will be the context and the culture. So this leadership, no leadership system of any type exists in a perfect vacuum where there's just no clutter, only clear lines. Leadership does not exist in this type of environment. And leadership norms do vary according to the organizations. So like some organizations, for example, hospitals, will have a culture, hopefully, of caring. Now, my sister just had surgery in the Dallas area, and I think the name of the hospital, I should remember this because I'd love to give a plug for them. Not that I want any of you to have to go to the hospital, but it was like Southwest something. and it's right off of Harry Hines Boulevard in Dallas. The culture of this hospital was so caring. And you know how they communicated that was with all of the employees. Now, I'm going to say, of course, my sister had this surgery December 28th. It's during COVID. There can only be one person a day there to visit with her, not just one at a time. But so she had to really plan that out. So if you were her person, you were her person that whole day. And so the hospital wasn't crowded. But what was really neat is anytime I left her room and walked to the cafeteria, every person, hospital employee that I crossed paths with, looked me in the eye and smiled at me. And if I looked the least bit confused, I was offered assistance. Are you looking for something? May I assist you? Where are you trying to go? And hospitals can be confusing. If you've ever been in those, you know, they're just a maze of hallways and rooms. And her situation was very delicate and intense, and there's lots of emotion involved. And I was just really impressed with how the people at this particular hospital created a culture that impacted me, a culture of caring. Also, there can be a servant leadership concept employed at another type of institution, like a Wall Street corporation, for example. Maybe it's more of a culture of competition. Servant leadership can still exist in a culture of competition. So whatever institution that you are going to be looking at, we're also going to have some case studies. Whichever ones that you're going to be checking out, you're going to want to understand the context and the culture in which that place exists as you arrive. Okay, also as you arrive, there are going to be leadership attributes. Dispositions of people, their personalities might be a word that I would use. That depends on how they will demonstrate servant leadership. And there are different kinds of personalities. Anything out there that you guys could contribute and say to me, I think this type of disposition or this type of personality would demonstrate servant leadership.
Someone that's empathetic.
Exactly. They understand.
Communicative.
Yes. Good.
Encourage participation.
Yes. Yes.
Someone who prioritizes patients.
Yes. They prioritize their patients or their clients. I'm seeing a typo on my slide. I apologize. I will fix that. I don't know what emotional intelligence is. It's supposed to be emotional intelligence.
Creative.
Creative. Okay.
Someone who's charismatic.
Charismatic, yes. Good. These are all great servant leadership attributes, and that servant leaders would demonstrate those. And maybe you have like some fabulous servant leader that could demonstrate all of them. That would be amazing. It would also be probably rare. Emotional intelligence are traits that we could say they often emerge from servant leaders. Agreeableness and humility. Then another antecedent condition that you are going to find when you arrive at this organization, this institution, this business, is follower receptivity. So all the people that aren't the official servant leader, how receptive are they to that servant leadership model, to that approach coming into their workplace? And now you were asking me, Lisa, just a minute ago, does research show this or that? here is some research on servant leadership that has proven true, is that follower receptivity, if they are open to the idea of servant leadership, does ultimately lead to good/better performance. So that's kind of an interesting thing to note, research that has been done on servant leadership. The reason, like you're like, well, why would anybody want to work in an environment of this type of attitude and this approach and with a servant leader? And the criticism that some followers give of the servant leadership model is that it feels to them like being micromanaged. If the person that they're supposed to get instructions from or that they report to is too interested or too involved in the followers' work, then they might feel micromanaged. And it, I could see any comments on that. Anybody want to say that?
I think it's a, I think it's a difficult balance because I think I do my best to follow the servant leadership model. That's why I was excited for this class to be the first one anyway, with my wrestling organization. But at times I'm bad about micromanaging people. So I'm interested in learning kind of how to get away from that and become a better delegator, because it's either I micromanage them or I just do it all myself. So it's hard to balance that, I think.
But Nick, can I ask a follow-up question and clarifying? When you say micromanaging, because I've worked for a micromanager and I didn't interpret them as being a servant leader at all. And so what are you thinking of? Because when I think of a micromanager, well, what are your thoughts? Why do you associate that? Just curious.
Okay, so prime example is I'm a wrestling coach, so I'll go in there and be like, okay.
When I think of one, I take it as someone who doesn't have confidence in their employees. So for you, Nick, is it that you don't have confidence in them, or is it that you want to assist them and make sure they're, you can be there if they need any help?
I don't know if it's that I don't have confidence in them, but it's just more so like I feel like, okay, I know I can do it, and I don't necessarily know if they'll show it the same way I'll show the movement, and then I'll be like, okay, you show it. Then I'll be like, but you missed this, this, and this. So I don't know.
But don't you think that's really more being that service leader? Because it's really more about them not hurting themselves, doing it correctly, so that they're not injured, because you care about them not being injured, right?
I think it comes down to my communication style, and maybe I just have to do a better job of communicating.
So what you visualized in your head, you're like, I don't know if they can get this out.
In the same way, correct?
Yeah.
Like that the kids can understand, in the way that the kids can understand, because I think that's one of the most important things about being a coach is, I can know all this movements and all this philosophy, but if I can't put it in a way that the kids can understand, then I'm not going to be very effective.
I think being a coach and a servant can be kind of conflicting.
Yeah.
Because coaches are very, very, very direct in what they need their students to do, but yet they have that emotional, that's when in being who you are as a servant really serves for them. Like they look at you like, wow, look at this man. He's a man. I don't have a father. I don't have a guy that looks like me or doesn't look like me, that's a strong person in my male. And so it's kind of, you got to be able to see, okay, when am I coach and when am I here for their soul or to help them to develop and be better people? You got to know how to do that at the same time.
I think, Natalie, you've got a good point. I mean, there are times when you cannot be a servant leader. I mean, can you imagine a sergeant in the Army being a servant leader and asking all of his troops, so do you think we need to attack now? Well, let's take a vote. I mean, sometimes you have to, servant leadership isn't the correct method of leading. And back to, I mean, the original question, I think when you're in a position of leadership and there are a lot of insecure leaders that are afraid to give up control because they're insecure. And so if you're going to be a servant leader, your goal should be to develop your leadership potential within the group for two reasons. Number one is it's going to make your job easier as the leader. Plus, you're going to get better solutions to complex problems when you get more skulls thinking about solutions. So you should be developing your leadership potential within the group.
There's an aspect of this where people, or a lot of people, are not used to servant leadership. They're used to more of a command and control, so they don't know how to respond to that. So it's kind of a very delicate transition as you're moving to that, because you're a leader is trying to lead an organization forward positively for the benefit of everybody, but our associates that we work with aren't familiar to that. So it's kind of this very delicate transition trying to get to that point without being command and control. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's why you've got to be able to probably be able to do both, because there are definitely times you've got to say, I appreciate your input, but I'm the coach and we're going to play man-to-man defense. So you don't want half your players playing the zone. You got to decide, I'm going down with this ship and I'm in control. So if I'm going to be blamed for all the problems, we're going to play my way.
But you know what I think I could see, because there's leadership doesn't occur in a vacuum. That was one of the very first things I said. So there will be times that a servant leader has to shift into maybe more of this autocratic mode. But here's where the difference is, I think. Number one, what's your heart? Is your heart one of power? Is your heart one of being dominant and being in control? So you're having to switch to a more authoritative style. What's your heart in that? And then the second thing would be communication. Okay, if you've been able to do things democratically or collaboratively, then if you're going to have to step away from that mode of operation, then communicate with everyone and tell them.
Can I get in real quick? I don't think it's anything wrong with, allowing your team members to have autonomy to do something, but I think that even in that aspect, you inspect what you expect. So as a coach, if you see one of your coaches showing technique that is not necessarily critical where you want it, there's absolutely nothing wrong with stepping in and saying, you know what, that's pretty good, but this is where we need to be. And I don't think you step out of the role of a servant leader at that point. I like to make sure that my people are getting exactly what they want, but in that same aspect, I want to be there to support them. So you know what, they do reach their full potential. And I don't think, it didn't sound like you were stepping into a role as a micromanager to me.
The entire thing with micromanaging is control. If you are a servant leader, you are not controlling somebody. You're not micromanaging somebody. Nick, I love your Greek name. It's fantastic. Right. And I'm a fan of you, and you are not a micromanager.
Not at all.
No, when you tell your students what it is they need to be doing, it's because you are bestowing wisdom upon them and you are leading them. You are not micromanaging them.
It's about being aware. You have to be aware of the two types.
I would like to piggyback on a little bit of what our instructor just said about where your heart is. And I feel like to be a servant leader, your heart has to have acts of altruism. If you have the acts of altruisms in your heart, you're doing exactly what a servant leader is supposed to do. You're giving without expecting anything back. So whether you're a coach or a drill sergeant or whoever you are, that heart is what shows what is really your intentions.
Your intention is to make those kids better wrestlers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
With nothing in return. You don't ask those children to give you anything. You want to give them the love. You want to let them know that God loves them and they can be greater than what they are. And that's not giving back to you. You're giving to them.
I have a question real quick. This is back to the original part of the conversation, which was Dr. Case, you said that some people, like, who wouldn't want to work for someone who's a servant leader? And then you said it was because they feel micromanaged, maybe the followers. Does anything suggest that maybe followers don't kind of like, or they view servant leadership as like a touchy-feely or an emotionally driven approach? They don't like that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Some people perceive servant leadership as weak, as soft, less able to accomplish. So that is definitely an antecedent condition that could affect the outcome, because there have been situations where places have tried to implement a servant leadership model and it has not been successful.
Dr. Case, do they see servant leadership as being weak?
Yes. Yes, I think that some people do consider servant leadership to appear weak. And, you know, we all come to this from a different background. Some of us can see why that's just, that just doesn't hold water, as my mom used to say. That would not, in my mind, mean that a leader was weak. But depending on where someone else comes from their background, you know, I could see, I'm careful of stereotypes here, but I could see where someone that came from a strong military background, they might see servant leadership in place and they might think, oh, wow, who's in charge here? You know,
or I wonder if it's just not direct enough to get whatever we're doing from point A to point B. That's what I tend to wonder, is if those that kind of push against servant leadership at the beginning, is it, well, I can't trust them to be direct when it's time to be direct.
I think it's a misunderstanding, because I don't think servant leadership does not mean an absence of discipline, self-discipline, or organizational discipline. And so I think that would be a misreading of what it is from my perspective.
I think people get a certain because we live in a world where we ask, what can you do to make my life better? But we don't live in the world where we say, what can I do to make your life better? People don't feel that way. We have to kind of change that mindset. What can I do to make your life better? And that's seen as being weak if we're not taking over or ruling or micromanaging. You know, I mean, to me, that is the epitome of the servant leadership. What can I do to make your life better?
Well, and you kind of touched on a good point that I wanted to make, is that some people that are leaders would be cautious to approach their organization and be a servant leader because of that. They don't want to be perceived as weak. They also, another reason would be, they want to be in control. They want to be perceived as being in control, and they want to be perceived as being powerful. So, so perceptions are a whole lot, and it takes time. If you're going into an organization or trying to change the ship, you know, turn the ship around, it does take time to build a servant leadership model and environment and to establish yourself as a servant leader, because doesn't it take time to build trust for people to trust you? And if you're in a situation where you have a leader that's trying to become a servant leader and trying to establish themselves that way, you know, since like you said, that's just not how we're wired sometimes. So maybe it takes us a while to trust this person that seems to be sticking their nose in our business or trying to micromanage me, when in reality, they really care about me.
Exactly. Especially like when you first start, maybe like a servant leadership type mentality and mindset with people that haven't necessarily had that before. And they're like, why is this person so concerned with me? There's got to be something negative to it. And it does. And I think I was watching the video earlier, and they did say that was one of the negative consequences, that it does take so much time to build that trust in those relationships. And that's obviously the biggest part being a servant leader is you got to have those relationships so you're able to, really understand your clients or the people that you lead.
And especially, in today's world where we want things not just now, we want things right now. And if you're going to make significant changes, you have to be directive. You have to be authoritative and say, we're going to do this. Why? Because I said so. And so a servant leader has to understand you've got to go slow at first so that you can go fast later. But if you don't take your time to develop relationships so that people do know your heart, they do know you, it doesn't work out. It doesn't work out. But you're right. The most negative thing I'm going to say that I've found with servant leadership is you've got to be patient. Because as a leader, you're going to go into a group and you're going to be able to see and diagnose exactly what needs to change first. And you have to sit on it, pardon my expression, and be patient and just you just got to hold on. And that is so hard for especially someone that wants results right away.
You're exactly right.
So I got a question for you, Dr. Quace. Do you think that servant leadership is hard because people have different personalities and there's many attributes that they have to use with servant leadership compared to just having one leadership style that they can use no matter what?
I think that for some people, servant leadership is easier than for others. Some people it's just their nature, just kind of like their personality, the word that I was using earlier. So I think that other people, if they have maybe stronger, maybe more pushy personality, or like they know the answers and they just can't resist the temptation of stepping in and saying, this is the way it's going to be. Because what Dr. Wintroth is saying is exactly right. You step into a situation and you know exactly what needs to be done. But can you let the group realize what needs to be done? Let them collaborate and then come to a consensus rather than you descending and giving out the orders. So, so to not derail, but to answer your question, Nate, yes, I think it's very personality driven.
I have found too, in dealing with some of my sixth graders, it also depends on what experiences they're coming from. They have responded to various, and again, being a teacher, I'm looking at all the characteristics and the traits here, and I see it as pieces of a puzzle or tools in a toolbox, however you want to look at it, because there are going to be times when, hey, group building, team building, I can exchange with them. But then there are going to be things like intruder drills where the point is you do what I say and you do it now. But you've got to build that trust before that happens. And so I tried to look for opportunities to build that trust. But again, depending on how the kids are going to all respond differently. And there have been some kids that are just completely untrusting and almost suspicious, just from the onset. And I try to find out more about those kids and kind of dig into their background a little bit, because I want to think, I think I'm making it abundantly clear that I'm looking out for them. I am your advocate. I am trying to help you. And they're just looking at me like fear and trepidation, mistrust. Right. And even with some kids, I've built up the rapport enough where I say, hey, has somebody lied to you? I mean, has somebody just, you put your trust in them and they totally just took you down the wrong way. And 9 times out of 10, that's right. And so you're trying to be an example, but they're bringing these experiences with them that you may be unaware of, and that's going to affect how they respond.
I think one thing that, to piggyback off of what Sandy just said, I think in Dr. Case's example with military leadership traits and what Sandy just said about intruder drills, there are situations that you can die by not following the right directions, right? So you don't really have the chance to say, okay, everyone raise your right hand if you want to do it this way, because you don't have that benefit of time on your side. You don't have that benefit of safety on your side. So I think that the best leaders, again, to Sandy's point, can shift their toolbox to fix whatever is broken in that moment. It's not, well, by golly, I'm gonna hammer it till it's fixed. You might not need a hammer this time. You might need a wrench, or you might need some other tool that you need to access, even if it's not your first choice or even your second choice or 14th choice. We'll get there eventually. And I think the best leaders know how to maneuver themselves to get through that toolbox in an efficient way and to help their followers in the most advantageous way to everyone involved.
And I think a lot of I think a lot of that comes with consistency and like patience, because that trust gets built, especially with kids. You don't always know what's going on at home, kind of thing. And so some kids, you have to be able to, lead the way our students are gonna follow. And some kids may need differently. Like, if my whole teaching philosophy is, if our kids can't learn the way we teach, we have to teach the way they learn. And the same thing comes with leadership. I mean, some kids, all they know is getting yelled at. All they know is that firm hand, whereas some kids, want to be allowed to make a decision for themselves. And it takes both types of leadership. And I think it's consistency, like following through with your kids and getting to know your kids, and it comes to that.
I was going to say, responding to Jonathan, I can think of several times when my assistant principals, I tasked some of my assistant principals at Putnam City High School with a certain problem. And I could see they had not identified the correct problem. And if you can't identify the correct problem, your solutions are not going to be very good. It wasn't a critical thing that needed to happen. And so I just kind of chose to go ahead and let them make a mistake. And we wasted about 6 months trying to get this problem solved. But I know for myself, and Dr. Schellenberger, you just keep quiet here, I can learn from some of my best lessons I've learned by making mistakes. Yes. And so I think, like you're saying, you pick and choose the mistakes. And then it's just like being a parent. You can follow your kids around and boss them around all day long. And there are some problems you for sure don't want them to have to learn the hard way. But then there are some that all of a sudden you look a whole lot smarter once you let them discover the hard way. Well, you know what? I guess they were right. And so I think that's being a servant leader really is fun. I mean, it's like a game, and to win people over. And I don't know. I liked it.
Just to kind of piggyback off that point too, I think it's important that whenever they do make a mistake, you're the kind of demeanor you have when dealing with them. Like, it's not like I told you so, this is how it's supposed to be. It was more like, yeah, man, I mean, okay, we can work with that, and we can pivot and keep moving, and not really like kick a person while they're down, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
I like to make a point on that too, piggyback on what the instructor said. I like to always say, since I've been working as a therapist, I like to gamble on people. And a lot of times I lose. And, when you say it's fun, to me, it's more like, okay, let's see if this individual has that opportunity to change the trajectory of their entire life. Let's see what they'll do with it. Because that's what God gave us. He gave us free will. And to see what man can do with free will as being a servant leader and given that opportunity, sometimes I win and sometimes I lose. But I thank God for the people who made it when you gave them that opportunity.
I think that when they mess up, and then you're there with that, you still trust them, and you're still caring about them, and you still love them, and you're there for them. And I think it almost, as you're working through whatever mistake they had, then your relationship is even stronger with them.
Yeah.
And
I'd like
others
that. And I can piggyback on that, because I think it still comes back to that relationship, that listening, that empathy. people that you trust, you're going to let them fail, so to speak, so that then you can talk about that and deepen that relationship. But they're not going to try something if they don't feel like you trust them to try that. So in all of these, that relationship building has to come first with the empathy, and you have to know them, you have to listen, know them, and then that healing comes from the mistake, right? Well, it's the healing of an organization or the healing of the system, and that's going to take give and take, right?
Absolutely.
I agree with what Lisa said. I think it comes back to the relationships. And then I think, Tara, when you were talking about what people have dealt with before, I think you were the one that was talking about that. And we have to learn from people when we're building those relationships. What are the preconceptions that they're coming into this with? And what do we need to do to help them understand what the goal is, or what we're working toward, and how we're going to find that goal together. So I think it's that give and take that, and I think that's what sometimes some of those leaders are afraid of, is because they don't have 100% control of that situation, because it is a give and take. And I think that makes some people apprehensive.
And I'll tell you something else. I think a lot of leaders are afraid to make mistakes, and that is deadly, especially for servant leadership. You have got to you've got to have people willing to make mistakes, and you'll be okay if you never make a mistake, but you'll never be great if you are afraid to make mistakes. And so that is another one of those things you have to develop within the group, is just like in teaching a class. If people are afraid to be wrong, they'll never ask a question in class, and you just won't learn as much if you don't participate. And so that's another one of those things that as a leader you have got to be willing to accept mistakes. And anyway, it's complicated, but it really isn't. I mean, it's just being real with the people that's following you, and everybody working together to accomplish a really complex task.
I think it's about a culture of creating risk, and it goes back to being a role model for whoever you're leading, to show that you're willing to put yourself out there, and if you fail, you just pick yourself up. You learn from it. You definitely learn way more than if you got it right the first time. So, challenging employees to take risks, but also showing them in role modeling that you're willing to also do that, and just creating that culture of trust with them.
See there, Dr. Wainwright, Dr. Schoenberg, I was just trying to model to my faculties by making mistakes.
Dr. Wainwright, I have a lot to say, and I'll say it in a few minutes. So anyway, go ahead.
Okay, well, let me continue on with the next category. If we're referring back to that figure 10.1, the antecedent conditions, we covered that. And I've got to tell you, I'm never going to stop a rich discussion. So, and that was, I think, fits perfectly what all we just discussed in the antecedent conditions, the behaviors that we see, and we touched a little bit on some outcomes. We'll get more into that later, but we definitely covered the antecedent conditions and the servant leadership behaviors. And this particular model from these theories identifies these servant leader behaviors from the chart. 3, and you will notice there are 7 here. These 7 are different, some different, some the same, different than the 10 that we see that we're going to discuss next week, and that I shared with y'all just on Friday night as a brief list. But servant leader behaviors that you will see, servant leaders are good at conceptualizing. And to me, this is an odd word to choose, but the meaning behind this conceptualizing is that they will, that servant leaders will be able to conceptualize a vision and the mission for accomplishing that vision. They'll be able to conceptualize goals for an organization. Servant leaders are strong in emotional healing, and that I love that tie-in of the emotional healing, is that in some weird paradoxical way, that is a type of self-care, because there's so much conversation right now, and it's so important to take care of ourselves, put our mask on first, right? But Greenleaf's idea was that by helping to heal others emotionally, spiritually, by helping to heal them, that we also sustain and heal ourselves. And I do think that that's a type of paradox. Another servant leader behaviors is that we put followers first. And that is, to me, largely connected to the very next one, helping followers grow and succeed. And this is unique to all other forms of leadership. Servant leadership focuses on helping followers to grow and succeed. And of all the different tasks and all the different goals that a leader has to do, to then help the followers shine while they accomplish those tasks and help the organization, is just a staggering thing to get your mind around. So those two things, I think, are the tenets, the foundation, putting followers first, and then helping followers grow and succeed. And then servant leadership behaviors, servant leaders behave ethically. I would like to think that all leaders behave ethically. That may or may not always happen, but it is very definitely a characteristic of servant leaders. Servant leaders are empowering, and again, that relates to me to helping followers grow and succeed, but I'm just sharing with you what emerged from the research that is cited there under this particular chart. And then another thing that servant leaders do is they create value for their community. So Greenleaf would say that he doesn't see servant leadership as directly impacting the community, but by building up strong leaders in an organization, and an organization that's very altruistic, one of the outcomes is going to be that societal impact, creating value for the community. So, so those are the types of behaviors. And I think that you will appreciate thinking about those types of behaviors, and also in conjunction when we talk about the characteristics identified by Spears next week. So the last part of the chart speaks in terms of outcomes. And those of us in education are really familiar with this outcome concept, right? It's like, okay, you're going to do this and this and this. What are you going to get? That's the outcome. So if you have these types of conditions and then have this servant leader behavior going on, what can you expect to happen? What's going to be the outcome of these things? And one thing that you can expect is follower performance and growth. You can expect them to grow and to perform. So you can expect your organization to thrive, as well as your followers. And then as a trickle-down effect, you can expect societal impact as an outcome. So I can see this when I look at organizations like churches. I can see this with schools. I just know in my community, the impact that Bethany Public Schools has had on the community is very positive. I think that you can see this type of societal impact with some professional sports teams that are really involved in their community. My son works for Los Angeles Football Club, and their commitment to the community and how they're involved and do different things is built on a type of servant leadership model. And so I can see that that is an outcome of servant leadership. So to look at this a little bit more, and this may be a little bit repetitive, but repetition never offends me. I learn by repetition. So how does servant leadership work? Puts followers first. This doesn't feel natural. A lot of leaders, and some of us have worked for leaders, maybe all of us have worked for leaders, that's hysterical. That leader was never going to put followers in place first, because leaders that don't do that, maybe one reason they don't do it is because they're afraid. What if their followers outshine them? What if their followers do more or do better? Then does that threaten their position as leader? But
is that not the goal
of servant leadership?
Yes, ma'am.
It is the goal, but other types of leaders could not embrace that goal because they don't want their followers to do as well or better than they're doing.
They want to be indispensable.
Mm-hmm.
And so to raise up the level of leadership within the group, that's threatening to them.
Mm-hmm. I've seen it in academia. You see some instructors that there's no way they want the students to be as smart or smarter than they are. I mean, that's something in academia I've seen everywhere I've been. I could think in business, you know, like maybe a sales type of organization. If there's a sales manager, there's no way that sales manager wants the other sales reps that are working for him or her to do as well. When in reality, if the reps do better than the manager, that's awesome. That's good for everybody, right? But just depending on the leader's confidence, I think you said that, Dr. Wintroth, confident leaders aren't threatened by the success of their followers. In fact,
well, how do we vet these how do we vet them? Because these type of individuals that you're talking about are they are in organizations big like DHS, you know, or they have a lot of, you know, power over others. I've seen a lot of corruption, those type of individuals that you speak of. How do we vet them out of these important organizations that govern so much of people's lives?
well, some problems you can't change. I mean, that's a huge, almost political type of issue, if not political, at least institutional, right? Are those state institutions, those state agencies, or federal institutions and agencies? So how to vet them, how to solve that problem, honestly, unless you get involved in that organization, you can't. And then even if you did get involved in that organization like DHS, I'm not sure you can, unless you can make an impact on the leader. There has to be a desire in the leader's heart to change styles. So for those of us that embrace servant leadership and embrace positivity and are willing to work for the good of others as well as for the good of themselves, it's hard to admit, I can't make a change here. I can't make an impact.
So how do you help the fatigued servant leader when they've been doing these things? It's like, to me, I feel like working with the children in DHS. I have a diversity of people that I work with, but my heart is a lot with the children that are in DHS. And a lot of the times I feel so powerless to help these children. What do we do to address our servant leader fatigue?
I just wrote that question down.
Right, but I think if you're truly being a servant leader, you're not gonna be fatigued. If you're a good teacher, and you brought up an excellent point about I teach children. My goal is to have my children be able to do what they need to do and turn to me as a facilitator. I should look at my 30 kids in my classroom and they should all be working collaboratively together on a project. So I am raising them to be servant leaders. I'm not tired. My goal at the end of the day is to exhaust the snot out of these little kids and to me not necessarily be refreshed, but I'm not tired because they're doing all the work.
Well,
But Natalie, you bring up an excellent point. It's not the children, it's the people who have grown up that have become jaded and they have become hardened and they don't know how to be a leader because they've never been taught to be a leader yet, let alone a servant leader. So Dr. Case, maybe you can answer that.
I think there is fatigue though, Natalie. Like if you feel alone in your workplace, I think that's why this class, I know it energizes me just like tonight because I've recently changed organizations and I strive to do servant leadership. But in the new organization, it's kind of what we talked about previously, about some people have viewed me as micromanaging and this. And so I go home kind of feeling defeated. And I left my support group from my last organization. So you just have to find, I think, support group. And, it might be a battle every day in your workplace, but try to find at least a couple people that you can talk to and reassure you, hey, you're doing the right thing, even when you're kind of working against the system or whatever you're working against. And always know that whatever you're doing best for kids, you're always right.
I was just going to say that something interesting Tanya brought up too is that in the role, so I'm thinking about servant leadership. In my role as a teacher, when I was a teacher, I have to agree, I didn't feel, I felt like I could be all these things, all of the different characteristics. I mean, the healing, the listening, I didn't seem to have a problem doing that and really embodying that servant leadership. But when I transitioned into becoming a principal, I found that my patience, going back to something Dr. Wentworth said, my patience with adults was not the same. And so I find that it is much more difficult and frustrating and fatiguing to be a servant leader in that full, embody all 10 of those qualities in my current position. So I just wanted to touch base on that because I thought it was interesting that it was sort of brought up.
I always had more patience for the kids than I did for adults, always. But like the devotional was saying, you don't know what people's history is, and you don't know what baggage and how they may have been harmed. And so you just have to, I loved teaching, and I quit teaching when I finally started getting good at it. But I felt like I had more influence, and I missed those kids in class so bad, that relationship. Same thing like with Nick, you're talking about your athletes. When I stopped coaching, that special relationship, coach athlete relationships, that's why so many teachers are jealous of coaches, is they don't have that relationship.
Exactly.
And so but I felt like I could influence more people if I could influence the adults in a school versus the kids that I saw face to face in my classes. And so I think what I would go back and say, Natalie, is, you know what? You can only control what you can control. And you can get crazy and it'll wear you down. And, all you can do is what you can do with the kids that you see right now. And you're going to do such a great job that someone's going to notice you. God has got you right exactly where you're supposed to be. Yeah, I mean, I am absolutely convinced of that. And so you just keep doing your thing.
I'm trying to convince myself, and I'd like to tell you, Tanya, I had a case, and I'll be very brief, to let you know why I am so fatigued with fighting for children.
Oh, girl, I do not want your job at all.
Yeah, in the system. 3 years prior, I fought for a child not to be in a home because of this individual. She wasn't ready for the trauma. You know, a lot of individuals don't understand. You have to, when children have had a lot of trauma, you have to do connection before correction. And she was a very big disciplinarian. I went to my legislator to keep her from keeping that baby because they do, you know, force guardianships. She called me 3 years prior. I went to see that baby. And I'm giving you one example. She's been trying to get rid of him since then. And she was angry about him not taking a bath. He talked back, and she told me right in that house that she hit him so hard that he could see stars. She knew that he could see stars. And I fought for this baby for so long. So I went to DHS because she texted me some other terrible things about this baby, that he was the devil and all of these things. And guess what? Like they always do, they kept that child in the home. This child has been emotionally and physically abused for 3 years. That hurts, okay? And I've got a 10, 14, 20 million stories just like that. So that's what I'm talking about, you know, as being that servant. You ask God to guide you, and then, you know, you just got to give it to him after you've done what you could do.
Yeah.
And I really think to kind of bounce on what Tanya said, I think one thing that we might be getting confused is we can love what we do. I love what I do. When I get to see a room of 25 teenagers, a lot of people would run. I know that when we tell people we are teachers, we kind of see that look on their face like, man, I don't know how you do it, until it's time to pay us. But then every other time, that's like, how do you do it, right? And so I love that part of my job. I love getting to pour into those kids. But at the same time, I am refreshed when I do that. I love getting to fight the good fight. But sometimes it is heavy. Our job is to care and to protect kids. That is heavy. It just is. It's the nature of what we do. And we get really good at wearing that weight and carrying it around with us. But I think sometimes it's important to realize it's still heavy. We've gotten stronger, and we wear a really prideful face sometimes, but I think we forget sometimes how much support we have from other teachers, from our administrators, and from our kiddos. They know when something's wrong with us, and they support it when we least expect it from them, but when we need it the most. Mm-hmm. And, I've learned in the 3 years I've taught, which I know is not very long, but kids are 20 times more responsive to support than you ever expect them to be. And when you least expect it is when they will do the most for each other and for you.
Well, and I think one more thing, sorry. I'm a math teacher, so I kind of look at it from a numbers perspective. And so I think if one of our principles of being a good leader is to make 5 or 10 or 12 other good leaders, that self-centered leader is not looking to replicate. I mean, they're all about them. So if we're going to pour into people, for each one of us, there's going to be 10 or 12 or 15 other people. And so I really think at some point the tide is going to turn. And so if we do what we're supposed to do, we're going to be fighting the battle up front. But I really think, I'm struggling for words, it's been a long day, but a quote unquote weak leader is not looking to replicate themselves. They're looking to be the boss in charge, and they don't care what happens after them. We want that legacy of good leadership. We want to replicate the good qualities, and so we can outnumber them in the future.
And honestly, I'm just in tears because over these 10 years, I've just seen so much ugly, and you do get fatigued. You're strong, and you got to be for them, But when you're by yourself and you look at it, it's hard.
I'd like to share that everybody gets fatigued. I'd like to share that everybody gets fatigued. Everybody feels these feelings. It even happens when you're doing something nice and something good. Think about a wedding. And if you say, no, not me, that's why the stress indexes exist in the insurance companies or whatever. And if you went and looked at one, you'd be surprised how far up you are. You know, how much you are facing and how much you are doing with stress and with fatigue. We all feel it. We all get it. Some and even in the context that Natalie faced and others in other contexts, but we all feel it. And we have to learn how to cope with it. We have to learn how to disconnect. We have to learn that R&R, rest and relaxation, and how to recharge the batteries. Let's look upward and let's reach out to each other.
Yeah, I would like, oh, I'm sorry, I feel like we all. So I was going to piggyback off with Jonathan and Nick and also Dr. Windrow. Like, I actually think I can relate. I used to be a football coach for SNU, and my first story that I came in there, I had kind of a micromanaging attitude. I had these things that I wanted to do, and the kids were repelling my efforts because I just had in my mind that I wanted to get results. That's what a good coach is supposed to be. I wanted to be the perfect coach. But then I stepped back away and realized that spending time with the individual players, getting to know them, and actually having them trust me about things opened up doors for me to become a better coach, because I started trusting in them and they started giving me their best efforts, because now I'm not looking at them as, hey, you know what, you're just here just to play football. I'm looking at it, hey, you know, you're a person, Christ first, let's get together, let's grow as a team, and I want to see the best for you. I want each of you to have a bright future. So that shift, that paradigm shift, changed me as a person, because I realized from my follows that coming in there trying to be authoritative in some circumstances it's good, but also you got to have like the different personalities and be able to be aware and read the room and see what's available for that situation. So yeah, I can relate to that, man. It was very struggle. I had to deal with that a lot, and just taking a step back and seeing things from this now. I wish, you know, if I could do things over again, I would have just started, put the trust in the players and get to know them first. And then we can talk about football and do all that stuff later.
You've probably, I bet every one of y'all have known coaches that had great talent on their team, but they didn't perform well. And then you also knew coaches who didn't have great talent, but for some reason those kids played hard for those coaches. And same thing in a classroom. You get an average group of kids that want to test well for their teacher because they just have the love and the trust, and they want to do. Being an OSU guy, it was always difficult, but the great servant leader, Bob Stoops, and again, that's hard coming out of the Aggie's mouth, but when they won ball games, he always gave credit to the players, always. And if they lost ball games, he always accepted the responsibility of the loss. He did, and so did the assistant coaches. They didn't prepare their players to play. Well, those are the kind of leaders you want to play hard for. And so that's part of what you have to do as a servant leader is take up for your players, take up for your teachers, take up for your followers. And you know, that's just part of the deal. You know what? This is not a flattering pose. You can see the thin spot on the top.
You said you weren't going to say anything else.
I'm going to cover up.
I'll back it up in a little bit. Well, and I'm looking at while he was talking, I was looking at some of the chats over here on the side, and I love it. I love what I'm seeing, you know, just about all aspects of our conversation. And then Crystal, what you said, I'm enjoying the unity we are showing. As Kayleen said, everyone has a different experience. And then we're also kind of going through that process of building trust and openness and communication with each other. And what a blessing that we can do that even through Zoom. So, and then Anthony, you said something that I love. It's straight out of the Marzano and Scott book that I use. People don't know that you care. Don't care what you know until you show that you care. So I think that's pretty fundamental to this. Servant leadership works by supporting the development and growth of followers. Servant leaders are altruistic, and one of you already used that word tonight. They downplay competition and promote egalitarianism. I also made note of the question, how do we help the fatigued servant leader? I think that's going to be a really good question the night of our panel. On the strengths slide, now we're kind of done with that chart, that model. The only leadership approach that frames the leadership process around the principle of caring for others. So that is what is unique to servant leadership, is that it's framed entirely around caring for others. And in caring for others is sometimes emotionally exhausting. Sometimes it's physically exhausting. This sounds, I don't know, I'm not trying to build myself up, but I don't know what it's like to be a domineering leader or one that is oppressive or controlling. I don't think I'm that type of leader at all, but I can only imagine that that would be mentally exhausting.
Lonely.
And it would be lonely to exist as a leader like that. Yeah, who even wants to relate or communicate with a leader like that? The servant leadership will give up control rather than insisting on being in control. And servant leadership is a non-traditional approach to influence. So what are the weaknesses of servant leadership? It does not work if the followers are not receptive. And I'm not sure that you can lead up. You know, you've heard lead from the middle, but if you're trying to be a servant leader and you're trying to lead up and affect those people like you're talking about at DHS and all, I'm not sure. And that might be a question for research. Can servant leaders that are trying to lead from the middle, can they lead up? You can certainly lead those people if you're looking at an org chart that fall beneath you, but can you affect change above you? What do you think, Governor?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I don't think so.
I think if you're affecting change below you,
yeah, I think
you
if
can do
you're
it above
affecting
you.
outcomes, yeah, I think if you're producing outcomes and there's something within whatever you're doing that's showing positive results, the people above you are going to wonder what you're doing. And in that way, and that is leading from the middle. And in that way, if you're creating that societal change in the locus of control that you have in that ecosystem, because if we think about all organizations, they're an ecosystem, and what levers are you able to push on to cause the change? Is the change noticed? Is the change sustainable? Then somebody up top is going to go, wow, your department is really performing well. What are you doing? I would hope that's the way it works, right?
It
Either that
depends.
or they'll leave you alone. That's
It
kind of what
depends.
you
Let
do
me
that
tell
job, they'll leave you alone.
Let me tell you, my anthem is always, I fight authority and authority always wins. And my thing is that like I said in the beginning, I may not be able to make that big change that I want and have all that power that I want, because then if I had all the power that I wanted, as much passion as I have, Would I continue to be a servant leader? Would I go and rain upon them, the ones that kill the children, and not see what's going on with them, you know? So what I've learned to do is just sit with them. You would be very, very surprised how impactful it is just to sit with a family when they're going through a crisis. Just be there. Your presence changes the trajectory of the pain. So it's hard to sit in the pain, but it feels good to see families do better. And I do have some success stories. So it's just not all bad, but you do get fatigued.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Thank you, Natalie. And that is heart-wrenching. I know you all have stories and stuff you deal with, and you sharing yours is very meaningful. And I, for one, am very appreciative. I know we all are of what you do. Our president, Dr. Keith Newman, does a presentation that really changed my approach to how I understood my mission. And he based it off this one bit of advice from Andy Stanley. And it's do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. And that really helped me, because sometimes, you know, I'm trying to make this big impact on, in my case, education in Oklahoma, and you just want to see this big impact, right? And and if you try and start eating the elephant all at once, it's just not going to work. But I can make an impact one grad student at a time.
It's kind of like that starfish story, the kid throwing the starfish in, and it's like, why are you doing that? There's thousands of those things out here on the beach. And he goes, it didn't make any difference. He goes, well, it made a difference for that one.
Exactly.
Sling that one out there.
Exactly that same story.
Yeah.
I have an antecedent to that. When we were in the Arctic, and there were flounders that they were thrown up on the beach. And so we were throwing the flounders back in, and the fishermen out in the water said, don't you know how long it took me to get those out of my net?
Those are free fish.
Oh, that's good. Other weaknesses of the servant leadership theory is that researchers to date do not, I think this edition is 2017 or 18, do not agree on a common definition or framework for servant leadership. There are some that are accepted, and it's getting more and more research-based all the time. And servant leadership can be easily confused with prescriptive work. So you have to look at it like, I look at prescriptive work kind of like consulting. Like if you would hire a consultant to come in and tell you, hey, how do we make this institution a servant leadership oriented, designed institution, okay? And then that would be prescriptive, like using a consultant. And then research theory is going to be where we look at an organization that is a servant leadership organization, and we apply theory to it and see how it fits in that theoretical framework. Application of servant leadership can occur at all levels of management. So go ahead.
I would just like to ask a question that kind of just came to my mind about the researchers cannot agree on a common definition. Is that because there's a lot of unknown variables applied to servant leadership? Just you can't, like, I guess a better way, there's no universal way to be a effective servant leader. Everyone's going to have different things that they do to be able to be an effective servant leader, if that makes sense.
I think that's an initial way to approach it, Nate. As people have studied Greenleaf's premise, and you know, he started this back in the 70s, which at this point was a while back, right? So now there's a body of research to look at, a body of case studies and things. So I think the consensus is getting tighter on what servant leadership is, and now it's a viable area of study, academic study. The two universities that are most noted for their study in servant leadership are Regent University and Gonzaga. Am I saying that correct? Gonzaga?
I think
Yes, they have a good basketball team too, right?
Gonzaga?
Gonzaga. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can tell that I don't know.
Number one.
My husband would be laughing at me. But those two universities have, and y'all could look it up. You could, do some search in some of your annotated bibliography sources and find out what places have done the most research in servant leadership. Quite honestly, it would be just fine with me if Southern Nazarene got on the map for really starting to build some pillars in the servant leadership area. I don't dictate what you research on, but as time goes on, I think that more and more of our doc students will begin to build on that body of research. So agreeing on the common definition or framework, maybe it's not as solid as some other theoretical frameworks just yet, but it's certainly evolving that way. Application, they can apply to all levels of management and all types of organizations. Organizations cited in Northhouse that intentionally use servant leadership: Southwest Airlines, as I mentioned before, Starbucks, and I have heard that, AT&T, I have never heard that, and Vanguard Group. So AT&T some days is not on my good list. So that may be why I have a hard time getting that. A defining characteristic of these organizations is that they want to build long-term relationship with their followers. The leaders in these organizations want to do that. So as we scoot on over to, I think you have a few blank slides in there. There are some comments about implementing servant leadership that fits into the discussion that we've had. I think some of you are going to be like, yeah, that's what I was saying. That there has to be a fundamental change in the organization if you want to implement it. Like if it's not a servant leadership organization, then maybe there needs to be a big change either in the actual leader or in the leader's heart, a decision to make that change. That includes attitudes and behaviors. Servant leadership means that the leader becomes soft glue that holds the organization together as a virtual community. And I thought that was interesting. I love the soft glue analogy. There is a sense of common identity that links a common purpose, which must be fed by an infectious energy and urgency. And I think that that ties into me with the conceptualization characteristic common of servant leaders is that a servant leader has a mission or a goal and inspires those that are following to join in that mission and goal. And that creates that energy and that sense of urgency that impacts the entire organization. Those of you that have been in my ed leadership class, and that's a few of you, I have Dr. Williams speak, and it's a stage model of leadership that he addresses, and it's stage 4 and stage 5, but it's all about where people, it's a transformational model where people work together to accomplish a noble cause. They have this uniting thing about them, and I think the same is true for servant leadership. Some people would say things to do when implementing servant leadership, and I would like to add to this list. Okay, I did not make this list, but some people would say to become a servant leader, you should eliminate a reserved parking spot. I'd like to hear your arguments for or against that. Another thing that some people would say in implementing servant leadership, assume that someone is watching at all times. A good leader sets the tone and always assumes that someone is watching. I guess, like I said, I didn't come up with this list, but I'd like to know if any of y'all have some things that I could add to this list right now.
Well, I wouldn't be opposed to the special parking space, especially if it's close to where I need to be.
I agree.
My prior job, we would bid on reserved parking spaces, and the money would go to the United Health. It would go to my mind just went blank. I'm sorry. Some charity. So we would bid on these parking places, and we would get to pick where we wanted to park. So now for the CEO and stuff getting to park in the parking garage, I think that should be eliminated. And if I can't do it, neither should they.
Okay. So that does make an impact. That's something that as a servant leader, if you arrived and you're the CEO, you would say, I want to be a servant leader and I am eliminating my reserved parking place.
I think it's important to eliminate it, but more than eliminating it, I think you can repurpose it to make it more effective. So instead, I think what a reserved parking spot says to your team is that I'm more important than you.
Right.
I deserve closer because I have those awesome that I'm after my mind. But I think it's powerful to repurpose that and say, well, I want to give it back to you. How about we have employee of the month, most dedicated, most effective, remote, blah, 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 team player of the week or month or whatever it is. And I think that sets a new tone. That says, I want to pour back into you. How can I make this a better experience? How can you learn more than I'm able to provide? How can I facilitate you for maximum success? And I think that tone is a very crucial difference.
Okay.
I feel like people are taking the servant leader as the fact that we are not human beings and we don't like the reciprocity of feeling good. You know, there are some little things that could feel good, like a parking space or maybe a free lunch. That doesn't make us a bad person. That makes us a human being, you know? So I think don't get on that high horse, you know, and think, you know, just because we are a servant leader that, hey, just whatever it is, and I don't want anything, my soul desires nothing. That's not true. As humans, we do want that type of gratification, whether it be seeing somebody win or being able to get a $10 gift certificate to go to Starbucks. So, I mean, you know, we got to kind of weigh that out.
Well, and like on Friday night, I mentioned, had a list of things that servant leadership was not. You know, it's not humiliating. It's not being enslaved. I think one thing I would add to this list, and I think we could add several things. I think that a servant leader would be someone that tries to establish and build relationship with everyone in the organization. And depending on the organization, that could be daunting. You know, if there are thousands, I'm sure the CEO of Paycom would be like, yeah, so how do I do that? You know, but depending on your organization, you could figure out a way to establish and build relationship. And in that establishing and building relationship, I think that very first thing, listening, comes in. And I've already read from the online class today some of the comments on the characteristics, and listening is a big deal. So that's something I would put down on there. The thing that I don't like about the assuming someone is watching at all times, well, the reason I don't like that is because that's like living under a cloud of guilt, I think. If I pick up trash while I walk up to my building, which I park in front of the church, and then I walk over to my building at Herrick, and I always stop and pick up trash. And I don't pick it up because I'm pretending someone is watching. I pick it up because I'm a good human being and I love this world. And I just think, why not? I can bend over and pick up the trash. I'm thankful I have the flexibility to do that. So I do it, you know?
And
I think it goes.
Yeah, I think that's why I pushed back on that one, because it says assume someone is watching. Well, you should always model the behaviors you expect to see, because it doesn't matter who's watching. We should do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And you can't catch character. You can't catch character. You come above, you come to know character. So watching someone all the time, you don't know exactly their character. You know, so character is not something that you catch. Oh, look, she's throwing away trash. Character is what you are, what you breathe, how you walk, and how you believe. And that's character.
Yeah, for I guess the pushback for the reserved parking spot, would it be possible if it transferred into a handicap parking spot? I mean, we could use other resources for that parking spot. I mean, it's just, I don't think it just has to be reserved just for one individual. If it's something that someone that needs help, why not transfer the resource for someone that could benefit?
Handicap parking spots are already designated. You can have one way in the back, as long as you know you have a spot when you come to school.
Well, or I know what you could do if you're auctioning off parking places. Like someone was saying, we auctioned off parking places and then we got to pick our parking place. So win the auction, buy your parking place, and then choose one to keep the other ones, choose one far away to keep the closer ones more available. I don't know.
Exactly.
What other things could we do to implement? Let's say you arrived at this place. Maybe you've arrived at a place before and you've implemented a certain practice that
I said be willing to do whatever you ask your followers to do.
I was going to say that.
Right.
We have to load our kids like one by one in the cars as they go home. And apparently the principal that was there before me didn't do that with the teachers. And that's something that I do. And it makes a big difference, because when it's 110 out or it's pouring down rain, and then I've got teachers out there. I think it means so much that I go out there and do that too with them, and I'm a part of it. And I know that was one of the things that the first couple of weeks they kept staring at me like, why is she out here every day when we load kids? Because I feel like that's my job too, to keep them safe and get them where they need to go.
Mop the floors. If there's water spilled in their hallway, you go mop the floors. You don't go ask the custodian go do it. You take care of what needs to be done because it needs to be done. Mm-hmm. There's no job beneath you.
I think one thing that could be done, implemented, that really builds relationships, but also kind of, I guess, shows that you're human, is admit when you make mistakes. And every time I've been any kind of leader in any kind of organization, whenever I admit to my kids in the classroom or my kids in the wrestling room that, hey, I messed up on this, I'm gonna do better next time, there's always a positive outcome. They're like, wow, coach can admit that he makes mistakes, or Mr. Turner can admit that he makes mistakes and that he's not perfect.
Yes.
And Nick, I'm going to add to that a phrase: admit when you make mistakes or when you need help.
Yeah.
You know, because I hate to admit that sometimes I need help with technology. I want to land and just be able to just rock this and do this perfectly. But you know what? Sometimes I can't do it. And so I need to respect that there are other people that can do it, and then be thankful for them and admit I need the help. So I would put those two together: admit when you make mistakes and admit when you need help.
Would that all fall under the lens of vulnerability?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I'm gonna put that down.
I mean, you're just being real. I mean, who doesn't make mistakes? And we've all followed leaders who refuse to admit they made a mistake, and everybody in the group realizes it. And so why live a lie? Mess up. Try not to make the same mistakes again.
And I think for kids, sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think for kids, we're modeling for them and setting an example, because that's one of the reasons I love teaching middle school, is because there are things we take for granted. I think it and I know how to say it. Well, kids don't always. I mean, they're going to think it, but sometimes the way they say it needs a little polishing, or, you know, a little correction. But I think just kind of pausing and being the one that helps them, you know, to say, okay, here's how you would ask for help. Here's a good way to ask for help. Here's a good way to ask a question. And so we're modeling for them and just kind of helping them transition and get some independence. And it's okay to ask for help, and you don't have to know everything. And they're, you know, going to be teenagers quickly. They're going to already think they don't need help. But just to model and give them some healthy ways to ask that, some productive ways to ask that. And I think sometimes I just assume they know, and they don't. And a lot of them don't communicate effectively, and that kind of gets them into trouble being middle schoolers.
Good, thank you. Any other things to do when implementing servant leadership?
I really agree. I'm not sure who said it, but about leaders doing whatever they're asking. I will tell you, Mr. Gervaisi did not go to school to teach algebra. So covering classes during COVID has been real fun. But I really notice when those leaders are in the trenches, are with us. And that kind of relates to one other thing I was going to bring up. I think one thing that leaders can bring when they're bringing their servant leaderships to a new organization is that open door policy, but more importantly, meaning it. You know, everybody says it. Everyone says, "Oh, just ask me anytime. My door is always open." But really meaning that and making sure that your team knows that you mean it is indispensable. When I first started teaching, I was younger and stupider, and I would just ask away. I was not afraid to ask questions, which was probably a strength of mine. But I've learned that some people don't like those questions. And you learn very quickly who to feel comfortable and when you can feel vulnerable to those people. Because I think some ineffective leaders view questioning and vulnerability as weakness. And I think everyone here knows that that's not true. I'm not the best. I will never be the best. There's always going to be someone better than me. And I think it's important to know that, because that's exciting, right? I can always learn to be better. I'll never run out of things to learn. So really letting your team know that there's no wrong questions. If you're brave and you want to know those answers, by all means ask them. I think a lot of organizations have really penalized asking questions, and I really hope that we can get away with that. We see it with our students, right? It's ingrained in them to be afraid to be wrong, and to be vulnerable, and be afraid that they're going to be ridiculed for not knowing everything under the sun. And I think that brings up a point that someone mentioned earlier to I think it was Nick, and let them know, yeah, I'm wrong. I'm wrong all the time, every day of the week. It is what it is.
I wanted to chime in on that, Jonathan. There are often times that people can be false servant leaders. And a lot of times I think that's where that comes from, in children feeling like they can't ask a wrong, a stupid question, as people say. Because the false servant leaders, they will make you feel like, okay, yeah, I can give you all these ideas. You're allowing me to be innovative. You're allowing me to express myself, but then they don't take any of that in. They're just letting you feel that way. And in the end, they're going to go with what they want to in the first place. And I think sometimes with children, teachers can do that. They may take it in, but then it's like, oh, okay. But then never acknowledge. Like if a child says, I do better learning this way, or I do better, if that teacher doesn't ever try to change that approach with that child or with other students, I mean, they didn't really take that in. They were, they're doing it to be a servant as far as their position, but not necessarily taking on that full servant leadership role.
And I'd like to add on taking the initiative in calling people by their first names. I think that's a huge thing, being able to identify and just have conversations where you're investing, where someone's first name, and anyone in the organization. Doesn't matter if they're a janitor, they're a student, you still call people. Anyone you see, their name, and you're able to talk to them, and you can invest your time in them.
And that's the first thing. That's the first thing. Past students, they come up to you and they say, "Do you remember me?" Well, that was 20 years ago or 30. But knowing someone's name is so powerful. I mean, it's the nicest compliment you can give somebody is if you know their name.
And on that investing note, I mean, knowing a little bit of their story, obviously they don't have to share their life story with you, but a good leader is going to know, okay, she has 2 kids. This person just got divorced. You're going to know a little bit about them, and just showing an interest in their life or who they are as a person can make a huge difference. Because, you know, I've had good leaders and I've had bad leaders, and that whole open communication thing is so key. And then on top of that, if they know who you are, if they know a little bit about your life, or if they just listen to what you say, back to that listening thing that we were talking about earlier, it's so vital.
Well, you are exactly right. Listening is vital. And so when you guys do respond to the characteristics and all, you know, certainly feel free to mention listening or any examples that you have, but also look at some of the other characteristics. One thing about listening, I came from Oklahoma State University before I came to Southern Nazarene, and my dean of the College of Education there, which the whole College of Education was as big as entire SNU. So, you know, it's just a different place and all. And one thing that Dean Carroll did is once every 2 weeks, she had coffee with the dean. And someone was saying, you know, like, do you really mean your open door policy? And she just showed up in her conference room and with a Keurig and a bunch of K-Cups and just said, anybody, you know, come by. You can mention something to me. We can talk about whatever. If it's something that we need to talk about privately while no one else is around, we'll schedule an appointment. But that was how, with a large group of people, she managed an open door policy. And that was something that she could put in her schedule all the time. So I thought that was really an interesting technique. And so how you can start to build relationship with people in your organization depends on how big your organization is, depends on where you are in that organization. And we've had a lot of talk here related to education context and environments, a few comments from other environments, but I do want you to be able to assimilate these concepts into multiple environments. So think about, you know, what servant leadership would look like in other organizations that you are a part of, that you're familiar with, that you observe, maybe that's someone that you're close to as a part of. The 21st century is really ripe for growth in research in servant leadership because we have shown an interest in our culture and in our society in being innovative, and not just innovative in the terms of being trend-setting and making more money, but innovative in how organizations work. So I really think that servant leadership is kind of coming into a sweet spot of existence. I really do. So that is all for the slides. And Dr. Schellenberger, I'm going to get the camera on you, and I want you to back clean up for me on this conversation. Now,
sure.
Give me a minute. Oh, your head's just fine, Dr. Wickraw. Okay. All right, here we go. There he is.
Zoom in. Okay, can you guys hear me okay? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, thank you. And I want to, first of all, I really enjoyed reading your Get to Know Me, Get to Know You post. I can relate to several of your comfort foods. Millennium Crunch ice cream, pizza, tacos. I can relate to a lot of that. So thank you for introducing some of those foods to me again as I read your post on getting to know you, and those were very interesting. I will just remind you, if you have not done that, please fill that out ASAP because we do need those posts. Dr. Case and Dr. Wintroth, by the way, if you don't know, Dr. Wintroth and myself, we worked together for several years. He was a principal at Bethany High School while I was a superintendent. We also worked in tandem with each other as middle school principals in Putnam City. And when we were in coaching, I was at the best school in Putnam City, Putnam City North. He was at the
You see,
other side of
you're
the
already
tracks.
starting to irritate.
He was at the other side of the tracks at Putnam City High School. So we have that little friendly gig at each other. But we will play off each other and do a lot of things in tandem. And I have been real good tonight as I have allowed him to speak a lot. And he sometimes just speaks to be speaking. So I've allowed him to do that. And anyway, we will go about and clarify some of this later. But I want to take just for a minute before we go into another assignment, and we may have them introduce themselves next week. But I just want to take just a different angle and on this servant leadership. And I heard this word 3 or 4 times. I think Kayleen, you may have said it. Nate, I think you said the word, and Dr. Case flirted with it a little bit. But as you think about servant leadership, think about the culture in which you work right now. That's very important for servant leadership. Understanding your culture. And in week 3, we will have some exercises to do and talk about some research that some research scientists have done in the area of culture. And in one culture, servant leadership may mean something entirely different than another culture. And think about this just for a minute. Servant leadership might be in some aspects of providing leadership for the masses, and sometimes the few have to be prodded or brought along. So sometimes when you do servant leadership, you're thinking about the masses, excuse me, and the few that don't want to get involved will have to be dealt with, or they will have to be involved, or things like that. So servant leadership is certainly not a weak part of leadership, but it does take a person understanding how their culture is made up. Does that make sense to you, what I'm saying on that?
Very much.
Give me a 1-sentence feedback or a couple of words on that as I say those words.
Most definitely.
Okay. How does it make sense? And here's another, just a second. Here's another area that I'd like for you to think about. When Dr. Wintroth and I teach the MAEL, the Masters of Education Leadership, most of the students are desiring to enter into the field of administration, school administration. So we ask them to continually take their teacher hat off, place an administrator hat on. So I think that parallels a little bit with this class. Put a leadership hat on and think in terms of how you can lead your culture, or how you can lead, Dr. Case said the word environment, or how you can lead your workplace. So when you're thinking about that, you're not only thinking of it as a worker in a workplace or an employee in an environment, but you're thinking as the role of a manager being a leader. Now this word called leadership may be a little dangerous sometimes, because once you understand your culture, you may have to be in a mindset of changing the culture. And when you change the culture, sometimes servant leadership will not necessarily be the descriptive term in which you are thought of. But remember, you're leading the masses, and you're leading for probably and possibly some expected change. And that, in some ways, describe servant leadership. Okay, I've talked a little bit here. Give me some feedback on some of this.
Dr. Schellenberger, this is Stephanie. I just briefly want to touch on something. I work for the federal government, and we recently, to go into what you were talking about, we recently experienced a lot, we are experiencing a lot of change. And there's a couple of other people that also work on base with me as well in this class.
Yeah.
And we have had to look at things in a very different capacity. Working for the federal government, they are making great changes to the masses, but those changes also affect us in our individual administrative roles. And prime example, we have really been going forth with a lot of diversity and inclusion with the federal government. At one point in time, we were made to halt that, but our leadership was so adamant about continuing to pursue that, they found ways for us to continue to grow. So they took the culture of outside worlds and made an adjustment so that the culture of the inside of our particular organization could continue to develop and grow. So what you're saying is exactly right. You have to know your culture and then know your role within the culture and build from that.
Well, you did a great job of describing that, Stephanie, and I appreciate that. And in week 3, we will talk about cultural conflicts. And sometimes the culture does conflict with change. And sometimes it inhibits, and sometimes it prohibits change. And so there's a lot of understanding within our culture. Great point. Somebody else give me a thought.
I don't know where this necessarily fits in at the moment, but you know, I think that we've talked about servant leadership can be perceived as weak or, you know, as soft. I think it's the opposite. I work in the industry and I believe my company is a servant leader company. We're a lean manufacturing company and we depend on our folks to help us greatly. But I think it's anything but weak. I think it's a very high level of leadership. And I think it takes a lot of strength and fortitude in order to lead people from that standpoint.
Yeah, that's a great point. Right now, we're having a blank screen, but I do appreciate that comment. Somebody else, good thoughts on that.
I think with understanding your
Yes, it was.
Okay.
I think with understanding your culture, so what they taught us in my ed leadership program, I was at UCO, they always tell us, you know, watch things for a year when you come into a new school as a principal or an assistant principal. And then after that first year, that's when you start kind of implementing things and that taking on that servant leadership role and things like that. And you have to take that time and observe and understand how things work and how things have been in order to make positive changes as a servant leader. And I mean, that's where you kind of have to put that leadership hat on and be like, okay, so this is how it was. This is how they're used to it. How am I gonna implement this new game plan?
Okay, thank you. Good, Tara.
I got a great example. I think currently right now what SNU is doing is diversity and inclusion. I think especially with the way changing of hiring faculty and staff members, and also the current student population is changing as well too. Our students are now having student societies, Black student society, Hispanic student society. So now these students are getting together and forming together groups so they feel empowered on the campus. And I think that change came from the top down, and people like faculty, staff, everyone's buying into it, and students are buying into it. So it's changing the culture of SNU.
Okay, I'll agree with you, Nate. And one of the reasons I'll agree with you is we see it as we're here. But at some point, someone in leadership understood the culture and they wanted to make I say they, whoever, it's individually or plurally or whatever, decided a change should be made. So an understanding of the culture and then implementing a change. Now, those are two descriptive statements, but it's a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of effort goes in to implementing a positive change in the culture. So,
and you know, I hear something else. I'm going to say something again. I'm just going to mess with you. I think we're the jobs we're doing right now, and the desire to become a leader is because we want to change things for the better. Now, anytime you deal with the government or a governmental agency, change is going to occur slowly. I hate it, but I understand it. And the reason why I understand it is because it's designed to do that. It's designed to change slowly so that mistakes aren't made. You know, it'd be terrible to be able to snap your fingers and make things change so quickly that you get so far off track you can't bring her back in line. And so I think that's the frustration that Natalie, you were talking about a little bit, is that when we see things that are absolutely wrong and we know what we think we could do to fix them, it's just a slow change. And unfortunately, you see the pain that it causes individuals. It's bothered me ever since you were talking. I just, bless your heart. That's all I can. You're doing such a difficult job, and the burnout because of what you see is high in your field. So just hang tough and affect the change you can where you are, and hopefully it'll get better.
Well, and Dr. Whitecross, something I like to add to the discussion when you use the word change, I always like to add the word positive or negative to that, because I do think positive change happens slowly.
Yeah.
I think negative change, man, on a dime.
Yeah.
You can impact your culture in a negative way, but to impact your culture in a positive way, it's like you have to build it and build it and build that trust.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you realize this good thing is happening.
Yeah.
Do you think
You're absolutely right.
I'm right?
And that's part of that whole thing. You got to go slow at first so you can go fast later. If you try to go fast at first, who's that new sheriff in town? What does he think he's doing or she doing? She doesn't know what works and what doesn't work. They're just coming in here shooting the place up. So that's part of knowing the crowd, knowing your culture, and learning the culture. All right, now be quiet.
And I think an important aspect of servant leadership is it's designed to have a societal impact. And when we think about a societal impact, that is a long-term goal. And you have to think about all of those pieces and those parts, and it's not going to happen overnight. And sometimes it does require a change in culture, but you have to understand the culture and then work through what can be changed. But I think that overarching long-term outcome of a societal impact is so much different than increasing productivity of making widgets, because that leadership style may be different unless you're making widgets to make a societal impact that is making a more green product or something like that. So to me, that's one of the distinguishing characteristics of servant leadership.
And one thing that comes to mind, I'm so glad that I'm hearing everybody talk about culture, and for myself, I'm thinking about, my own group that I work with. And just one thing that I'm wanting to do and that comes to mind to me is just using that language, servant leadership, a little bit more regularly, so that I can develop a higher level of comfortability, and so my team can develop a higher level of comfortability. Just saying it, I feel like in some senses, is a different kind of prompt to practice. So I really appreciate hearing everybody talk about culture. It seems like an opening step to a culture shift.
I think to Dr. Case's point.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think to Dr. Case's point, when she's talking about how negative change can happen as soon as you blink, COVID-19 has been a great example of that. In my experience with effective leaders, culture is their baby, and they guard it, they protect it well. So when we've seen COVID-19 has not caused equitable solution, there's no good solution many times. It's not fair, it's not fun, it's draining, it's all of the bad adjectives you can think of. But those effective leaders that care about their teams and value and protect their culture have done so well, even when it was the hardest. And I think people notice. I mean, when you see, I'm going to go back to education, principals that are trying, I'm sure, spending hours that they don't have to reach out to their teachers and let you know they're valued and give you your payday snacks or, whatever it is, those little wins, they matter, and they really safeguard that climate that they've created and worked so tirelessly to create. And so they don't want to see that go to shambles.
Hey, thank you. These are great comments, and I do appreciate you thinking outside the box a little bit and thinking about a cultural influence that servant leadership could have, on your organization. Again, think in terms of putting your leadership hat on and being a servant leader to your culture. And we will talk a lot about this in week 3. We're going to shift now for just a little bit. It's about 9 o'clock. And today I sent out an email, and you're placed in a group with another student. So for the next 30 minutes, what we're going to do is we're going to allow you to get to know a classmate that you were placed in a group today. And for about 30 minutes, you might share a telephone number, you might share information if you haven't already. But there is a getting to know you assignment on the week 1 of this module. And it states, I'll read this and you can follow up with this during the next 30 minutes, and then if you need to during the week. During class, learners will interview someone in the cohort they do not know, and being that we had to go on Zoom tonight, we just placed you, and then introduce them to the class. Learn something from the fellow student that might make them a candidate for one of the following television shows. The television shows are as follows: Survivor, Dancing with the Stars. That's Dr. Wintroth. He would love to be on Dancing with the Stars, except he's not a star and he can't dance. So other than that, Bachelor or Bachelorette, a flea market flip, or Shark Tank. So you have 5 choices that you would place your fellow peer student into one of those television shows, and you'll tell us why you would place your peer in that show. Now, so we will start the class session next week. I will remind you that you do have a couple of homework assignments. One of them is due, I believe, on February 13th, which is Saturday night. The other one is due on February 16th, which would be next Tuesday. So please follow that timeline and get those in on a timely manner. Just submit to Canvas, and then we will be able to look at your post and be able to grade that accordingly. So we will start next week, hopefully in person, and we will hear a great servant leader give the devotional, and we won't tell you who it is. We want it to be a mystery to you, but I'll just say this person has exhibited servant leadership over the 40 years that he's been involved in an Oklahoma City ministry. He has modeled servant leadership, and it'd be wonderful. You've had great discussion points tonight, and not to take on or exhaust the class session, but it'd be great if you had just a couple of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 great questions to ask this servant leader. And maybe it'd be philosophical, maybe it'd be implementation, maybe it'd be a culture, maybe it'd be how he gave of himself, just something that would benefit us understanding his servant leadership role. So we'll start the class session off with that. Then we will move to this exercise of introducing your peer. We'll take there are 12 groups. So let's take about, I would say, 3 minutes, about 1.5 minutes to introduce your colleague, and then the colleague in turn will go back and introduce you. And again, answer the question, what television show would you place your colleague in? And then at that point, we will go into the Canvas descriptions on night 2. What did you do, Dr. Winroth?
Well, I was typing something.
No, you're okay. Just click on the tab.
I'm finding it.
So,
The blue.
what questions do you have as we're getting ready to end up tonight? Right now, you're going to stay on, or you're going to either call or start emailing if you haven't already, and getting to know your peer through some chat and some conversation. but you know you have a couple of assignments due next week. You know that we're going to hear a devotional. We're going to go into this assignment, and then we will get involved with the night 2 Canvas presentation. I will say this, and I heard a lot last Saturday afternoon, some of your goals of when you will do your studies and when you'll set a time aside to do these activities. Make sure you get grounded in that time, because I was not a very good math student. And when I didn't understand the concept of this geometrical design or theorem, it was very hard for me to catch up on the next theorem and the next and the next. So it's kind of the same way here. If you don't set a time aside, and if you don't set a regular situation in your week to develop your reading habits, your reading styles, your notes, your outline of your plan of attack, so to speak, it's very easy to get behind, and then you really feel like it's mountainous to get caught up. So that's just a kind of a hint for you as you're starting this program this week. So any questions as we head into the week and head into next week? I'll just say you've been great to listen to. I hope this has been beneficial for you. Dr. Penley, I see that you're on. Any comments you want to make as before we wrap up? I'll end us with a closing prayer, but before I do, Dr. Penley, anything you have for us?
No, this was a fantastic bunch of conversations, though. I have to say this is one of the most energetic and creative first classes I've heard, which I think bodes really well for the future. Yeah.
Great.
Thanks for
Thank you.
Yes, and he had just texted me and said, great discussion. That's been great.
Any burning questions we have before we sign off and you guys continue with your peer? Anything that you have a question on?
I just wanted to make sure about the assignment. You sent an email out that you divided to 12 groups. So those 3 people are in our group. We just contact each other directly, correct?
Now, one group has 3 people. Everybody else has 2 people. And okay. So there are 25 in the class.
Okay.
So yes, you just, if you would send each other your email, your cell phone or a contact, or through an SNU email account, using your SNU email, just start chatting and getting to know your colleague. And then you're going to introduce that fellow colleague.
Okay, no problem.
Well, thank you. Thank you for clarifying
I
that.
have a question. Yes. Is it due tomorrow or tonight?
You will get with, the plan is for you to get with your colleague right now. Mm-hmm. We still have a few minutes left in class, but if you don't do it until tomorrow or Friday, that's okay. The presentation, your introduction will be at the end, or it'll be next week. We'll do the devotional first, and then you will do your introduction after the devotion.
Will that be a deduction of points?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
We are not the point police.
Yeah.
Just making sure. I want to be on point.
I appreciate your concern. Thank you.
No, I just laugh because grades are a necessary evil in academic land, but I'm not a big believer in them. So
me neither.
Do we need to have any kind of like presentation for that, or we're just going to talk through it?
You're just gonna say, Terry, if I'm introducing Dr. Case, I'm gonna say, Dr. Case, she has her hobbies are this, she enjoys this, her family makeup is this. She would be a great candidate for the Dancing with the Stars because she has a gymnastics background. She likes to twirl, flip, and jump, and she loves to dance. That's how I would describe Dr. Case if I was doing this introduction, and I would back up why she's a great candidate for Dancing with the Stars. Dr. Wintrock, I would introduce him as being benign and very low key and bashful. So anyway,
I knew she was a dancer.
You know that. You better believe that. The only problem is my wife won't dance with me because I embarrass her, but I have the best time when I dance.
I have to say this. Let me say this. Our high school, when Dr. Wentroth was the principal of the high school, we received the National Blue Ribbon, one of the high school Blue Ribbon schools during the year 2016, 15, 16. Well, they called all the principals to Washington, D.C. One of the secretaries of education would bring them on stage and give out the Blue Ribbon Award. Well, when Dr. Wentroth represented Bethany High School on stage in front of a national audience, he did do a little dance. It wasn't very good, and it was embarrassing, but he did do a little dance.
I did a Michael Jackson moonwalk.
So, and it was horrible. But
It
anyway,
was awesome. What are you talking about?
Anyway, we'll show it to you sometime.
No, you won't.
So, that's your assignment. Anybody else have a question about next week?
No, sir.
Okay, I'll say this. Throughout not only this week, next week, you have my telephone number up there. Let me give you Dr. Wentroth's 405-795-1552. 405.
That's not right. But that's okay. 1552. Where'd that come from?
Tell it to me. Okay, so
It's,
my point's going to be, if you have ever any question, 795-9441. 795-9441. If you have any questions throughout the week, call us, email us, stay in touch. That's the most important thing I can say to you right now. If you ever have a question, call us or email us or text us, and we'll get back with you, okay? So, 795-9441.
I'm sorry, can we spell Dr. Wentroth's name, please?
WENTRO.
If you call me, you have to call before 8 o'clock because that's when I go to bed.
Okay.
Way past my bedtime. When you get old, you know.
9:30 call. Esper calls at 9:30.
Yeah.
Okay. All minds clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll pray. We'll be done.
Well,
and then
on my end.
Then you can contact your fellow colleague. Okay? Father, we're thankful for this time. I pray for the safety of all students, whether they're traveling or they're at home. I pray for the safety of just our state as we go through looks like a blizzard and a snowstorm in the next few days. Keep us warm and safe. I pray for these students, again, individually, and I pray for them collectively as they start this new journey. And we, again, take this very seriously that they're a student of SNU. We love and appreciate all of them. Be with us tonight. Bring us back safe next week. In your name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Okay, guys, have a great week.
All right, love you guys. Y'all have a good week. I'll see y'all Wednesday, hopefully. Bye.
Bye.
Good night. Good night, everybody.
I'm going to ask Sean to record that.
Juanita. Yeah. I can't.
You got to
There we go.
unmute.
Sorry.
There.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess Ophelia didn't stay on.
Yeah, I kept sending her a message like, hey, we need your number.
And you know, there's I saw a list of numbers somewhere on our site. I went through it trying to, I've forgotten everything I learned Saturday. I'm like, oh my God, I'm trying to wrap my mind around this. My stressed out brain around this.
Right. Okay, well, Nita, okay. Well, no, that's you. God, though. I had wrote down the wrong person's number.
It's
Oh, my
okay.
goodness.
Mine is 921-9130. I wonder if maybe she got on this conference call, do you think?
I mean, she hasn't checked anything because I sent her a private message and everything. So,
oh,
I don't know. Oh, my goodness.
So you're tech savvy. That's good. Because I'm not.
Well, I just took the number that I just took a number that I use from when I'm at work. So
okay, hey, works for me.
yeah. So
you work for Tinker?
Uh-huh.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So I guess we can do each other, and I'll try and reach out to her if I find that number. I've got to find that number.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of phone numbers out there. I saw them earlier, but I can't remember where I saw them. Okay, so you work at Tinker. What do you do?
I'm in human resources.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, advise supervisors on disciplinary actions.
Oh, well, you would be my best friend. I work at VA and I'm a supervisor. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
We would be talking a lot.
Yes, we would. Way too much. Oh my gosh. How's your culture there?
Well,
is that your first federal job?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I worked at DHS before that. So.
Ooh, DHS. Ooh, wee.
Yeah.
Exactly. He's like, yeah.
Yeah. So you said the culture?
Yeah, at Tinker. We lose a lot of our people to Tinker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot.
Well, the culture is, I'm gonna tell you, I feel like the culture, I don't know how you phrase this, but